Chapter 2445. Coward Palace Master Jing Yin couldn't be bothered with the doubts of the other palace masters. She stood there calmly and didn't urge Zhuowen, nor did she say anything. The other palace masters didn't say anything after being snubbed, but there was a mocking smile on their faces. Obviously, they despised the cowardly behavior of Longwen, who was chosen by Palace Master Jingyin. Palace Master Wu Ju glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and didn't say anything. Instead, she turned to look at the situation on the Hell of Six Desires. At this moment, Yun Maozha was the first to reach the stairs. He was the first to land on the first step. The aura on his body suddenly erupted. Obviously, he was showing off to the others. The other 10 people knew Yun Maozha's strength. Therefore, when Yun Maozha reached the first step, they consciously avoided him. Yao Xiangjuan's strength wasn't any weaker than Yun Maozha's. However, in order to take care of Zhu Rui, she fell behind. Zhu Rui looked at Yao Xiangjuan anxiously and hurriedly said, "Senior sister, don't worry about me. Otherwise, you won't have any good spots to choose from later." Yao Xiangjuan shook her head and said, "Junior sister Zhu, although I don't know why your palace master wants you to participate in this test. If you rely on yourself, you won't be able to pass this test. In any case, we've gone through life and death together. Since you're with me, I naturally won't ignore you." Zhu Rui was touched and ashamed. She could only let Yao Xiangjuan lead her. The 2 women quickly reached the stairs of the Hell of Six Desires. Their speed wasn't fast. When they reached the stairs, there were already 4 people in front of them. Yun Maozha naturally occupied the first step. He didn't even allow the other 3 to fight for the other half of the first step. He was extremely domineering. Although the other 3 were angry, they didn't attack Yun Maozha. They knew very well that Yun Maozha wasn't easy to deal with. Therefore, the 3 of them took a step back and fought for the 2 spots on the second step. Zhuowen was no stranger to these 3 people. They were Tan Kai from the Palace of Desire, Qilon from the Palace of Desire, and Yuan He from the Palace of Desire. The battle between the 3 of them was extremely intense. None of them were willing to back down. When Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui arrived in front of the stairs, Yun Maozha smiled at Yao Xiangjuan and said, "Junior sister Yao, I've already reserved this spot for you. You don't need to compete with them to avoid dirtying your hands." Yao Xiangjuan's long, shapely eyebrows slightly knitted as she looked at Yun Maozha, whose gaze was blazing. She cupped her fists and said, "Xiangjuan appreciates senior martial brother Yun's good intentions, but junior martial sister Zhu Rui and I need 2 spots, so senior martial brother Yun won't leave any for me." After saying that, Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui brushed past Yun Maozha and headed for the 3rd platform. In the end, they occupied the 3rd platform. Since the 12 of them had not chosen their positions, the power of the Hell of Six Desires had not been fully released. Therefore, the people on the stairs did not feel the power that deprived them of their 6 desires. Yun Maozha's face was gloomy. When he saw Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui brushing past him, an inexplicable anger rose in his heart. However, he forcibly suppressed this anger. His unfriendly gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was not far away, who was still motionless. "He's just a coward," Yun Maozha said without the slightest hesitation. Although Yun Maozha's words were without rhyme or reason, many people present knew that the person Yun Maozha was talking about was none other than the white-clothed youth standing behind Palace Master Jingyin. Zhuowen glanced at Yun Maozha indifferently. In his heart, he drew a big cross for this guy. When he made his move later, he did not intend to show mercy to this guy. Bang! A miserable-looking figure fell from the 2nd step outside. Everyone focused their eyes and realized that this miserable-looking figure was actually Yuan He from the Desire Palace. On the 2nd platform, Tan Kai and Qilon looked down indifferently at the severely injured Yuan He. Soon after, they sat down cross-legged on the 2nd platform, no longer paying attention to Yuan He, who looked dejected. The moment Yuan he was struck down, the fourth and fifth platforms were also snatched away by other disciples. In the end, only the sixth platform and the first platform beside Yun Maozhe were left. Yuan he's beautiful eyes were filled with dejection. She knew very well that her injuries were not light. She was probably no match for any one of the 10 people on the steps right now. Trying to snatch it from them was just asking to be humiliated. However, Yuan he was unwilling to go to the sixth platform just like that. She knew that the sixth platform was the closest to the Hell of Six Desires. When the Hell of Six Desires was activated, she would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. On the sixth platform, there was no need for half an incense stick to burn. Yuan he even thought that she would not be able to last 15 minutes. When she thought of this, Yuan he's beautiful eyes fell on Yun Maozhe, who was on the first platform. She gritted her teeth and walked over to Yun Maozhe. She cupped her hands in a rather humble manner and said, "Senior Brother Yun, your position is also empty. Can you give it to me?" Yun Maozhe glanced at Yuan he and smiled faintly. "Junior sister Yuan he, you're too courteous. If you want this position, what's wrong with giving it to you? It's just that I can't stand the other participant of the Palace of Desire. That fellow is standing there like an idiot. Do you think it's fair for you to fight here alone?" Yuan he's expression was slightly unsightly. She glanced at Zhuowen, who was still motionless behind her, and snorted coldly. "This person is an extremely cowardly coward. It's simply a waste for my palace master to give a spot to him. I don't expect this person to help me in any way." Yun Maozhe smiled faintly and said, "Junior sister Yuan he, actually this coward is not completely useless. Ask him to get his ass over here. As long as he kneels before me and begs me to give up this position, I'll immediately give it to you. What do you think?" Yuan he was stunned. Then she cupped her fists and said rather happily, "Then, thank you very much, Senior Brother Yun." After saying that, Yuan he rushed over to Zhuowen's side. In Yuan he's opinion, this boy did not even dare to fight for a position, so he was definitely a complete coward. Asking this coward to kneel before Yun Maozhe and beg for position. This request was not excessive, and this coward could also be considered to have contributed to the Palace of Desire, so why not? So in Yuan he's heart, she felt that Zhuowen would definitely accept this proposal. Zhuowen had long heard the conversation between Yuan he and Yun Maozhe. He sneered repeatedly in his heart. But when Yuan he came before him, he still asked knowingly, "Senior sister Yuan he, why didn't you go and snatch it? Why did you come back again? Do you want to be a coward like me?" Yuan he's face froze, revealing an angry look, and she snorted coldly, "Do you think I'm you? What a good-for-nothing fellow. Now, I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. Now, go over and kneel before Yun Maozhe and beg for a position by his side. You just have to do that." Palace Master Jing, Yun stood on the spot and did not stop her. She was clear that Zhuowen had his own sense of propriety when dealing with matters, and there was no need for her to worry. Instead, Yuan he's performance disappointed her slightly, but she did not point it out. "All right, I'll go over right now." Out of Yuan he's expectations, Zhuowen agreed very readily, and then he brushed past Yuan he and walked over. Chapter 2446. Yun Maozhe was furious. Although the conversation between Zhuowen and Yuan he wasn't loud, it wasn't soft either. At least, all the disciples in the square heard it. Soon after, the disciples in the plaza roared with laughter as they looked mockingly at Zhuowen, who had finally taken a step forward. The rest of the palace masters also had strange looks on their faces as they looked at the indifferent palace Master Jing Yun in confusion. They were also flabbergasted. Why would Palace Master Jing Yun give a precious spot to this foreign cultivator in front of them? They could naturally detect the aura on Zhuowen's body. He was at the peak of the void sky 7th step. This kind of cultivation wasn't weak, and there was a gap between him and the great disciples of the 6 palaces. Of course, in their opinion, even if there was a gap, there was no need to be a coward. Therefore, they looked down on Zhuo. Yuan, he looked at Zhuo's back and was stunned at first. Then he sneered and followed. On the stairs above the 6 Desires Hell, the 10 disciples who had chosen their seats looked at Zhuo with different expressions. Among the 10 people, except for Tan Kai, Qi Lan, Yao Xiangjuan, and Zhu Rui, who looked serious and strange, the others looked disdainful and contemptuous. Zhuo's behavior just now had already made them think of him as a coward. The smile on Yun Maoji's face grew wider and wider, and the disdain in his eyes grew stronger. Tan Kai, who was sitting one step behind Yun Maoji, sneered in his heart and thought to himself, "This Yun Maoji really thinks that he's invincible among the younger generation. He's going to suffer soon." Not long ago, Tan Kai suffered a great loss at Zhuo's hands. This made him realize how terrifying this white-clothed youth strength was. Yun Maoji was one of the 2 strongest disciples of the 6 Desires Palace. His cultivation was around the peak of the Void Sky 8th step, and he looked down on all the younger disciples of the 6 Desires Palace. Tan Kai knew that Yun Maoji was very strong, but after being defeated by Zhuo, he changed his mind. He had personally experienced the despair he felt when facing Zhuo. It was much stronger than Yun Maoji's. The reason why he had such a feeling was because he knew that the white-clothed youth in front of him was much stronger than him. He had already surpassed Yun Maoji. Qi Lan and Yun Maoji had similar thoughts. After all, Zhuo had casually defeated Tan Kai in her garden. He was even more clear than Tan Kai about how formidable and terrifying Zhuo was. Zhuo stopped more than 10 meters away from Yun Maoji and looked at him silently. "I've heard Palace, Lord Jing Yun mention you before. You're called Longwen, right? I say, Longwen, look at your senior sister from the Desire Palace. She didn't even manage to grab a spot. You are also a member of the Desire Palace for the time being. Shouldn't you help your senior sister?" The mocking smile on Yun Maoji's lips deepened as he continued. "There's one more seat beside me. Even if it's empty, it's still empty. It's not impossible to give it up. If you kneel down and beg me, this seat will belong to your Desire Palace. You or your senior sister can sit here as you please." Zhuo looked at Yun Maoji silently. He knew that the reason why the latter targeted him from the beginning was probably because of Yao Xiangjuan. Zhuo felt a familiar gaze fall on him. He immediately raised his head and saw Yao Xiangjuan sitting on the 3rd step, looking at him apologetically. Zhuo smiled slightly, indicating that the latter didn't need to care. This small detail between Zhuo and Yao Xiangjuan was naturally caught by the sensitive Yun Maoji. Jealousy burned in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Longwen, what are you still standing there for? Why don't you do as senior brother Yun says? Do you want me to invite you?" Behind him, Yuan, his unfriendly voice sounded. His tone was full of urging and disdain. Zhuo ignored Yuan, his urging behind him. Instead, he looked at Yun Maoji indifferently and said with a smile, "Senior brother Yun, there are 2 of us here. I'm afraid 1 seat isn't enough, right?" Yun Maoji was taken aback. Soon after, he sneered and said, "You still want 2 seats?" Yuan, he came to Zhuo's side first and said coldly, "Longwen, why would a coward like you need a seat? If you also want one, go to the 6th step. There's another seat there. I prefer this 1st step, so I don't plan to go to the 6th step." Zhuo said indifferently. Yun Maoji's face darkened. He sneered and said, "You mean you plan to snatch my seat?" "That's right. If senior brother Yun doesn't want to get hurt, you should give up this seat. Otherwise, you'll be embarrassed later," Zhuo said as if nothing had happened. Yuan, he was stunned on the spot. Zhuo, who was only a coward in her eyes, actually said such gutsy words at this moment. She couldn't react for a moment. "Haha, what a joke!" Yun Maoji grinned. In his heart, he felt that Zhuo was definitely courting death. Just as he was about to open his mouth to refute, a gust of wind suddenly swept over. The terrifying power caused Yun Mao's pupils to shrink. Bang! Yun Mao punched out without thinking. The terrifying fist wind spread out like a storm. Then he groaned and retreated from the first step, landing below. The moment Yun Mao landed, a figure brushed past him and stood where Yun Mao was just now. "Senior brother Yin, you're too polite. Since you've given up this seat, I won't be polite." An indifferent voice slowly sounded, finally breaking the surrounding silence. Yun Mao looked at his trembling right fist, then looked in shock at the white-clothed youth who was already standing on the first step. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Just now, it was this white-clothed youth who attacked with a palm, and he casually punched out. The two of them exchanged a blow, and he was blasted out. Yun Mao could still feel the intense pain coming from his right fist. At this moment, Yun Mao was really shocked. How could a guy who he thought was just a coward have such powerful strength when he made a move? Although he didn't use his full strength just now to be able to injure him, this person was definitely not simple. Yuan, his beautiful eyes were stunned. She looked at Zhuowen, who was already standing on the first step, and then looked at Yun Mao, who was blasted off the step by Zhuowen. For a moment, her mind couldn't wrap itself around the situation. The surrounding disciples were also stunned. Evidently, this sudden turn of events had caught them off guard. The 6 palace masters were more or less surprised. Among them, Palace Master Wuzhe looked at the calm and composed Palace Master Jingyan, and a thoughtful look appeared in her beautiful eyes. "Bastard, I don't know what kind of despicable method he used. It seems that I have to get serious." Chapter 2447. Hellfire Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. This Yun Mao really cared about his face. He was clearly the one who was blasted down by Zhuowen, yet he said that Zhuowen had used despicable means. "Senior brother Long, be careful. This is Yun Mao's natal artifact, Cloud Vanishing. Its power is extraordinary. What's even more strange is that when he uses this artifact, Yun Mao's figure becomes erratic and is very difficult to deal with." The moment Yun Mao attacked, Qilon, who was on the second step, warned Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded but did not care. Although Yun Mao's strength was not bad, the gap between them was not small, so he really did not put Yun Mao in his eyes. Whoosh! Yun Mao's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he arrived in front of Zhuowen. Then, a cloud of smoke wrapped around Zhuowen, making it impossible for Zhuowen to see Yun Mao's figure clearly. Amidst the dense clouds, Yun Mao's figure drifted about like a ghost. Zhuowen stood in the cloud and looked at the surrounding cloud. His eyes revealed a trace of surprise. This cloud was quite powerful. Not only could it block his vision, it could even affect his divine sense. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was not an ordinary 7th step void sky cultivator. His divine sense was even more terrifying than a 9th step half-step void sky cultivator. Although this cloud could restrain divine sense, it didn't have much of an effect on Zhuowen's divine sense. Zhuowen could even clearly see Yun Mao's exact location. Of course, if it was any other cultivator at the 8th step, their divine sense would be completely useless. They would be like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, passively waiting for Yun Mao to harvest them. However, Zhuowen was different. Yun Mao's whereabouts were now completely exposed to his divine sense. At this moment, Yun Mao was hiding in the clouds and was secretly delighted. He thought to himself, "This guy is probably out of his wits right now, isn't he? I'll let you stay in the clouds for a while longer and let you feel this feeling of confusion." Yun Mao couldn't help but laugh out loud. However, his expression soon changed. He saw that the cloud of smoke in front of him was suddenly blasted away by a large hand. Then, this large hand of energy unceremoniously grabbed at him. "Bastard! How did this guy know my location?" Yun Mao's expression changed greatly, but now was not the time for him to be shocked. That large energy hand had already completely covered him, and he could only passively reach it. Yun Maojia's spear blasted out, instantly blasting out countless spear shadows in midair. He wanted to rely on these spear shadows to annihilate this energy hand. Unfortunately, this energy hand was too terrifying. The moment it touched the spear shadows were completely destroyed. Then, it ruthlessly smashed onto Yun Maojia's body. Yun Maojia was shocked and could only raise his long spear to block this terrifying big hand. Pucci! Yun Maojia spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he fell out of the clouds in an extremely sorry state and heavily smashed onto the ground. Outside, the onlooking disciples basically couldn't see the battle that happened in the clouds. However, the moment Yun Maojia was blasted out of the clouds, he immediately attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that this sorry figure was actually Yun Maojia, they all fell silent. Yuan, he took a few steps back and looked at the scene in disbelief. She was not a fool. Now, she finally knew that this Zhuowen was not a coward. Instead, he was an expert that even Yun Maojia was not a match for. As for why this Zhuowen had not moved before, she had also guessed the reason. Most likely, in his eyes, they, the eldest disciples, were simply not enough, so he disdained to compete with them. The clouds dispersed, and a white figure stood motionless on the first step like a mountain. It seemed that he did not move at all. Obviously, in the battle just now, Yun Maojia could not even make this person move a step. As long as one was not a fool, one would know how big the gap between Yun Maojia and this person was. At this moment, the onlooking disciples did not dare to doubt the strength of this white-clothed youth. Even Yun Maojia was easily defeated by him. Was there still a need to doubt this kind of strength? Yuan, his beautiful eyes flickered. She glanced at the white-clothed youth standing on the first step like a boulder, and her beautiful eyes were filled with a complicated and guilty expression. It was laughable that she had previously mocked this person as a coward. Now, she was ruthlessly slapped in the face by this battle. She glanced at the position beside Zhuowen and hesitated for a moment. In the end, she still opened her mouth and said, "Senior Brother Long, the position beside you." Zhuowen smiled slightly and said, "Senior Sister Yuan, you and I are both representatives of the Desire Palace. This position is for you." When Yuan, he saw the smile on Zhuowen's face, the guilt on her face became even more intense. She even stuttered when she spoke. She walked to the position beside Zhuowen and lowered her head. She did not dare to look at Zhuowen as she softly said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Long." Zhuowen only smiled. Previously, Yuan He's performance had indeed made him loathe the latter. However, this position was given to him by Palace Master Jingyan. Now that he had already snatched 2 positions, he naturally had to give them to Yuan He. Otherwise, Palace Master Jingyan would lose face. After a long while, Yun Maojia finally stood up. His face was pale, but the resentment in his eyes was even more intense. He glanced at Zhuowen, and without saying a word, he chose the last remaining position on the 6th step. Palace Master Wu Ju did not show any favoritism. After the 12 people had chosen their positions, she once again gave Desireless an order. Soon after, Desireless finally released the might of the 6 desires hell. Bang! In an instant, the hellfire at the bottom of the steps was like the mouth of a ferocious beast. It fiercely rushed up and enveloped all 12 people on the steps. If one were to observe carefully, the 6th step was the closest to the bottom. Therefore, it was the place that came into contact with the hellfire the most. It was also the place that was the most torturous. Yun Maojia once again spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face became even paler. He had already suffered serious injuries. Now that he was hit by the hellfire, his injuries were naturally worsened. Zhuowen frowned slightly. When the hellfire arrived, he didn't feel the scorching heat that flames should have. Instead, he felt an extreme chill. The instant this chill invaded his body, he clearly felt his 5 senses being gradually stripped away. The pain of having his 5 senses stripped away caused even Zhuowen to break out in cold sweat. This pain was much more intense than being skinned alive. Zhuowen thought that this was merely the first step. If it was the sixth step, the pain would be several times more intense. Just as Zhuowen was thinking about this, his divine sense sensed that Yun Maozhe and another disciple on the sixth step had already let out miserable cries. Those cries would cause one's hair to stand on end. The disciple standing beside Yun Maozhe only lasted for 10 breaths of time before fainting. His entire body twitched, and white foam came out of his mouth. Fortunately, the instant that disciple fainted, Palace Master Wu Ju used her divine power to pull him out. On the other hand, although Yun Maozhe's cries were very miserable, he was still barely able to endure. Time slowly passed. Of the 12 people on the 6 Desires Hell, only 6 remained. They were Zhuowen, Yuan He, Qilin, Tan Kai, Yao Xiangjuan, and Yun Maozhe. At this moment, only half of the time had passed. Chapter 2448. Pass the test, asterisk plop. Asterisk Yuan He, who was sitting cross-legged beside Zhuowen, suddenly fell to the ground and fainted. Zhuowen didn't have the time to pay attention to Yuan He. Instead, he silently endured the pain of his 5 senses being stripped away. This kind of pain wasn't instantaneous. Instead, it gradually deepened. It was like a skinner. He didn't peel off your skin all at once. Instead, he slowly separated your skin from your flesh bit by bit. This kind of pain was continuous. Moreover, it became more and more painful. Yuan, he was pulled out by Wu Jue. At this moment, there were only 5 people left on the platform. After an hour had passed, the remaining 5 people had all persevered. After Palace Master Wu Jue withdrew the hell of 6 desires, Yun Maozhe, who was sitting on the 6th platform, immediately fell to the ground and actually fainted. As for Qilin and Tan Kai, although they didn't faint, they fell into a state of unconsciousness. In fact, they weren't far from fainting. Yao Xiangjuan's performance was extremely good. Although her face was pale, her consciousness was extremely clear. She opened her eyes and looked around in confusion. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His condition was the best. His vitality was much better than Yao Xiangjuan's. It was as if he wasn't affected by the hell of 6 desires at all. The 6 palace masters glanced at Zhuowen at the same time. Obviously, Zhuowen's performance was beyond their expectations. Congratulations to the 5 of you for obtaining the qualifications to enter the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. In 3 days, I will open the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. I hope that you won't be late. After Palace Master Wu Jue finished speaking, she grabbed Yun Maozhe and slowly entered the Palace of Desire. As for Desireless, he was like a walking corpse as he followed behind Palace Master Wu Jue. Yao Xiangjuan stood up and smiled at Zhuowen. Senior Brother Long, congratulations! Zhuowen cupped his hands and returned the greeting. The main reason I have this opportunity is because of Miss Yao and Palace Master Jingyan. I still have to thank you. Speaking up to here, Zhuowen looked at Yao Xiangjuan in astonishment and said, Miss Yao, it seems that your willpower is really strong. It seems that you haven't been affected too much. At this point, Zhuowen couldn't help but glance at Qilin and Tan Kai, who were in an unconscious state. These 2 fellows were sitting on the 2nd step, while Yao Xiangjuan was sitting on the 3rd step. In terms of geographical position, Yao Xiangjuan was slightly inferior to these 2, but the impact on Yao Xiangjuan was actually smaller. As for Qilin and Tan Kai, they almost fainted. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes revealed a touch of imperceptible sadness as she whispered, Maybe I'm used to it. Are you used to it? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes were a little panicked, as if she had said something wrong. She hesitated, but did not continue to speak. Zhuowen was puzzled, but he smiled and said, I was a little impulsive on this matter. I shouldn't have casually asked. Zhuowen knew that Yao Xiangjuan must have her own secret to be able to pass through the 6 Desires Hell so easily. Wasn't he, Zhuowen, the same? If it wasn't for his divine sense being abnormally strong, he wouldn't have been able to pass through the 6 desires hell so easily. Yao Xiangjuan looked at Zhuowen with a trace of gratitude in her eyes. Senior Brother Long, I'll go back first. We'll meet again in 3 days. Yao Xiangjuan finished speaking and entered the Palace of Desire. At this moment, the other palace masters also left with their respective disciples. Senior Brother Long, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai before. Please forgive me. After sending Yao Xiangjuan off, Yuan He came in front of Zhuowen and lowered her head to Zhuowen with a guilty look. Zhuowen looked at Palace Master Jingyan behind Yuan He. He knew that Yuan He came to apologize under the instructions of Palace Master Jingyan. Moreover, Yuan He was unconscious before, but now he was awake. It should be Palace Master Jingyan who came. Senior Sister Yuan He is too polite. It's just a small matter. What's there to mention? Zhuowen said with a smile. Yuan He let out a light breath and immediately said, Senior Brother Long, your cultivation is high. It's not appropriate to call me Senior Sister. Just call me Junior Sister Yuan He. Okay. Zhuowen nodded. Longwen Yuan He, let's go. The 6 Desires Heavenly Lake will open in 3 days. It's useless to stay here now. Palace Master Jing Yun's voice sounded. 3 days later, Palace Master Jingyan once again brought Zhuowen to the square outside the Palace of Desire. At this moment, Palace Master Xianglan and Palace Master Huating had already arrived in the square. They brought Tan Kai and Qi Lan respectively. Tan Kai glanced at Zhuowen, his eyes full of fear, but he didn't say a word. On the other hand, Qi Lan gave Zhuowen a friendly smile, and Zhuowen also returned a smile. Palace Master Huating saw Qi Lan's small action and couldn't help but ask softly, Qi Lan, you know this Longwen? Qi Lan respectfully said, Palace Master, I only met Senior Brother Long a few times. I also met him in the garden. After chatting, I found that Senior Brother Long is a good person. Hua Ting nodded, as if she was muttering to herself. I heard from Jingyan that this Longwen seems to be a rogue cultivator. Moreover, he's not that old. It's really commendable for him to have such strength. Qi Lan's beautiful eyes revealed a strange color. Although she knew that Zhuowen was very strong, she really didn't know that Zhuowen was actually a rogue cultivator. She always thought that Zhuowen must have a very strong force behind him. That's why Zhuowen could have such powerful strength. She didn't expect that he was just a rogue cultivator. Qi Lan looked at Zhuowen with even more reverence. For a rogue cultivator to be able to cultivate to such a level, what kind of perseverance and opportunity did it require? At least, Qi Lan knew that she definitely couldn't do it. Zhuowen naturally didn't know about the conversation between Qi Lan and Hua Ting. He also didn't know that Qi Lan inexplicably gave him a good person card. Now he was looking forward to the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Zhuowen was very clear that as long as his original body's cultivation could use the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake to enter the 8 steps Void Sky, then his original body's strength alone would have a qualitative change. At that time, his divine ability, Waning Sun in the Sea, would have no restrictions. At that time, his strength would be comparable to the life enlightening realm. It could be said that the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake this time had a crucial effect on his advancement. Therefore, he couldn't help but be excited. Just as Zhuowen was deep in thought, the door of Desire Palace opened. Palace Master Wu Ju brought Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe out. 3 Palace Masters, you also know the location of the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Now follow me. The moment Palace Master Wu Ju came out, he took out a sparkling and translucent flying divine tool and brought Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe up. Zhuowen also noticed that Desireless was already on the flying divine tool. He thought in his heart, could it be that Desireless is also going to follow me? Palace Master Jing Yun brought Zhuowen and followed the other 2 Palace Masters into the flying divine tool. Chapter 2449. Six Desires' Poison Yin Mao's gaze was ignored by Zhuowen. Right now, he was looking forward to entering the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake. Palace Master Wu Jue's flying divine tool was extremely fast. After a short while, it stopped at a barren land in the northern part of the Six Desires star field. "It's here. Let's all go down." As soon as Palace Master Wu Jue finished speaking, she waved her sleeve, and everyone on the flying divine tool involuntarily left. Then Palace Master Wu Jue naturally put away the flying divine tool. Zhuowen looked at Palace Master Wu Jue in shock. Just now, when Palace Master Wu Jue pushed them out of the flying divine tool, Zhuowen didn't even feel it. Clearly, Palace Master Wu Jue's strength was much stronger than his. Palace Master Jingyan was already strong enough, but she was still casually pushed out by Palace Master Wu Jue. One could see how terrifying Palace Master Wu Jue was. Zhuowen couldn't help but think of the terrifying protection Yao Xiangjuan had triggered in the Divine Pill's secret realm by Luosha King. That protection was set up on Yao Xiangjuan's body by the dual extremities of life and death. Zhuowen knew that the protection should have been set up by Palace Master Wu Jue. Clearly, Palace Master Wu Jue was a genuine dual extremities of life and death expert. Palace Master Wu Jue's personality was clearly cold. He treated everyone and everything with an ice-cold appearance. Moreover, he was extremely domineering. Zhuowen wasn't used to Palace Master Wu Jue's domineering attitude. However, Palace Master Jingyan and the others looked calm. Clearly, they were used to Palace Master Wu Jue's style. Palace Master Wu Jue landed on the barren land in front of him. This barren land was formed by countless dim stars. Zhuowen looked at these stars and knew that they were on the verge of collapse. Palace Master Wu Jue formed a seal with both hands. Then the countless stars in this barren land began to move. Zhuowen looked at 1,000 miles in front of Palace Master Wu Jue. He saw a black whirlpool there. Those stars were constantly moving because of the whirlpool's power. The surrounding stars were all sucked into the black vortex. Then the vortex suddenly exploded, and a dazzling light flashed. Zhuowen could not help but close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he found that the wilderness in front of him had turned into a huge pool. The water in the pool was not clear and transparent. Instead, it was colorful, as if it was made up of all kinds of pigments. "This is the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake." Zhuowen could not help but ask in a low voice. Palace Master Jingyan nodded and said, "This is the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake." Right now, Palace Master Wu Ju has already opened the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake. Later on, listen to Palace Master Wu Ju's instructions. Do not go in without permission. Can I go in by myself now? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Yes, the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake is extremely safe. However, do you see the black substance around the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake? That black substance is extremely poisonous. Moreover, it is a poison that targets the depths of the soul. If you are contaminated by this black substance, it will be very troublesome. Palace Master Jing Yin patiently explained. After Palace Master Jing Yin's reminder, Zhuowen finally noticed that the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake was indeed surrounded by a black substance. Because this black substance was too close to the darkness of the starry sky, he did not notice it for a while. The Six Desires' Heavenly Lake is surrounded by the Six Desires' poison. It is a terrifying poison that targets the soul. If desireless does not bring you in, you will not be able to enter. Also, this Six Desires' Heavenly Lake exists in another space. Right now, this is only a projection. However, this projection has a teleportation function. Only by entering this projection can you be teleported into the Six Desires' Heavenly Lake. Palace Master Wu Ju looked around and introduced indifferently. Finally, her gaze fell on Zhuowen. Zhuowen's heart tightened. This Palace Master Wu Ju was an expert at the two extremities of life and death. She was many times stronger than him. Being stared at by her, Zhuowen felt as if his entire body was being seen through. Fortunately, Palace Master Wu Ju's gaze did not linger on Zhuowen for too long. Instead, she naturally shifted her gaze away. Zhuowen also knew that Palace Master Wu Ju's words were meant for him. Yao Xiangjuan and the others were disciples of the Six Desires Palace. They definitely knew the things to pay attention to when entering the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Only Zhuowen was completely unaware. You can enter. Just follow behind Desireless. Also, I must remind you that you only have a month's time in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. After a month, you will be automatically teleported out. After Palace Master Wu Ju finished speaking, she clasped her hands behind her back and no longer spoke. As for Desireless, he stepped out from behind Palace Master Wu Ju and slowly walked towards the Six Desires Heavenly Lake's projection. Yun Maozhe, Tan Kai, and Qi Lan hurriedly followed behind him. As for Yao Xiangjuan, she came to Zhuowen's side and said, "Big Brother Long, let's follow him." Zhuowen knew that Yao Xiangjuan wanted to take care of him. After all, he knew nothing about the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Zhuowen did not refuse. He nodded his head and walked alongside Yao Xiangjuan. When Yun Maozhe saw this scene, the resentment in his eyes became even more intense. However, he was powerless in his heart. This Zhuowen was too strong. He was simply not a match for him. Moreover, Palace Master Wu Ju would definitely not agree to his request and attack a junior. The instant Desireless walked to the edge of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake's projection, the black substance at the edge seemed to have encountered the heavens and earth. Zhuowen looked at this scene strangely. He could not help but ask, "Junior Sister Yao, is the Six Desires Poison afraid of Desireless?" Yao Xiangjuan smiled and said, "Senior Brother Long, you probably don't know the characteristics of the Six Desires Poison. Since it's called the Six Desires Poison, it's naturally related to the 7 emotions and 6 desires. As long as one is a human, they will have the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Even a cultivator with a high cultivation cannot achieve the state of having no desires. The 6 Desires Poison will follow the aura of the 7 emotions and 6 desires in a human's body and enter the depths of one's soul. As long as one still has the 7 emotions and 6 desires, the 6 Desires Poison will be able to enter one's soul without anyone noticing." When he heard this, Zhuowen also understood why the 6 Desires Poison would avoid Desireless. The 6 Desires Poison needed the 7 emotions and 6 desires as a medium to enter a human soul. However, Desireless did not have the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Therefore, the 6 Desires Poison had no way of entering one's soul. In fact, it was very afraid of Desireless. Following behind Desireless, Zhuowen's group was extremely relaxed. They did not let the 6 Desires Poison approach them. When they reached the center of the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake's projection, Desireless stopped. The others also stopped. Zhuowen was inside the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. When he discovered that there was no water flow, he knew that Palace Master Wu Ju had not lied to him. This was indeed just a projection. Suddenly, Zhuowen felt the world spinning. He was not unfamiliar with this feeling. It was the feeling of being teleported. Clearly, he was in this projection and would soon be teleported to the real 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Chapter 2450. Yun Maozhe, unwilling to give up when Zhuowen opened his eyes, he realized that his entire body was soaked in water. He lowered his head and realized that he was in a colorful pond. "I've already entered the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake." Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He immediately leaped out of the water and hovered above it. Zhuowen was surprised to find that his body was not wet at all after he leaped out of the water. It was as if he had not been soaked in the water at all. His body was not even dyed by the colorful pond water. What a strange pond water! Zhuowen muttered to himself. Only then did he start to observe his surroundings. He realized that his surroundings were gray, and the visibility was very low. He could only see about 1,000 meters away. As far as his eyes could see, he realized that the surrounding soil was similar to a high slope. The surface area of this slope was not small. However, the other areas were all gray and could not be seen clearly. Therefore, Zhuowen could not estimate the surface area of this high slope. However, in Zhuowen's vision, he saw the other 4-6 desires heavenly lakes. There were also 4 figures soaking in each of the 4-6 desires heavenly lakes. Needless to say, these 4 figures were definitely the other 4 people who had entered the 6 desires heavenly lake. Brother Long, the 6 desires heavenly lake will automatically distribute a corresponding number of 6 desires heavenly lakes according to the number of people who enter. The 6 desires heavenly lake contains energy that is extremely easy to absorb. Most importantly, the 6 desires heavenly lake can allow your comprehension to increase rapidly and help you break through your bottleneck. Yao Xiangjuan's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded towards the pond that Yao Xiangjuan was in. Soon after, he returned to his own pond and began to absorb the energy in the 6 desires heavenly lake without any distractions. The moment Zhuowen absorbed the energy in the 6 desires heavenly lake, his eyes lit up with excitement. This was because he realized that as he continued to absorb the energy in the 6 desires heavenly lake, his comprehension of the 8 steps of the void sky became more and more complete. Back when he broke through the 8 steps of the void sky, his comprehension was still lacking. However, now that he relied on the 6 desires heavenly lake, he realized that he understood a lot of the things that he was still confused about back then. Zhuowen's mood was lifted. He knew that according to this trend, he had the confidence to break through within a month. While the 5 of them were comprehending and breaking through in their respective 6 desires heavenly lakes, Desireless was floating in midair. It was as if he was unconsciously floating in midair. Whether it was intentional or not, Desireless landed on the edge of the 6 desires heavenly lake where Zhuowen was. He tilted his head and sized up Zhuowen. If Zhuowen opened his eyes now, he would definitely be shocked. One must know that Desireless did not have any facial features. Being sized up by such a faceless person was definitely a terrifying thing. Appearing as if he didn't discover anything, Desireless lost interest. He casually found an empty space and sat down on the ground. Time passed minute by minute. On the 20th day, Tan, who was in the leftmost pool among the 5 pools, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with joy. "I broke through." Tan Kai muttered with a smile on his face. His cultivation was originally at the intermediate stage of the 8 steps of the void sky realm. This time, relying on the 6 desires heavenly lake, he directly broke through to the late stage of the 8 steps of the void sky realm. Although there were still 10 days until they left the 6 desires heavenly lake, Tan Kai knew that these 10 days were not enough for him to break through again. Therefore, he stopped cultivating and began to consolidate his cultivation. At the same time, he also paid attention to the people in the other pools. One day after Tan Kai broke through, Qilon also smoothly broke through. Similar to Tan Kai, her cultivation also broke through to the late stage of the 8 steps of the void sky realm. However, she didn't stop cultivating. Instead, she continued to absorb the 6 desires heavenly lake and cultivate. Clearly, she didn't want to let go of the remaining time. On the 25th day, the pool where Yun Maozhe was in suddenly soared into the sky. Soon after, a terrifying aura spread out along with the soaring water pillar. Immediately after, Yun Maozhe's wild laughter rang out. Qilon and Tan Kai, who had already made a breakthrough, were naturally attracted by the activity at Yun Maozhe's side, especially when they felt the aura that was being emitted from the pool where Yun Maozhe was located. The 2 of them revealed a trace of surprise. "Looks like Yun Maozhe broke through to the half-step void sky, realm 9 steps. Although I'm a little unconvinced, This guy's talent is indeed stronger than mine. Tan Kai's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself helplessly. Qi Lan's eyes flickered, but she didn't reveal the slightest bit of surprise. Yun Maoji's talent was originally recognized by the Six Desires Palace. However, Qi Lan was more concerned about Yao Xiangjuan, who was still absorbing the energy not far away. Yao Xiangjuan's talent was actually above Yun Maoji's. After all, Yao Xiangjuan's cultivation was the same as Yun Maoji's, but the time she spent cultivating was much shorter than Yun Maoji's. Since Yun Maojia had already broken through, Yao Xiangjuan shouldn't be far away from breaking through as well. At this moment, Yun Maojia was floating in the air. In the void behind him, a huge void sky bridge appeared. He landed on the 8th step. Then his right foot suddenly stomped on the 9th step. Suddenly, half of the 9th step lit up. Yun Maojia's eyes flickered. He really wanted to put his left foot on the 9th step, but he knew it was basically impossible. After all, there was still a big gap between him and the real void sky 9th steps. This time he had only broken through to the half-step void sky 9th steps. After a stalemate of about 10 breaths, Yun Maojia finally didn't dare to put his left foot on the 9th step. He was very clear that if he forcibly put his left foot on the 9th step, he would definitely be counterattacked by the powerful energy of the void sky bridge. At that time, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Thinking of this, Yun Maojia withdrew his left foot and put away the void sky bridge. Senior Brother Yin, congratulations on breaking through to the half-step void sky 9th steps. As soon as Yun Maojia landed, Tan Kai cupped his hands and congratulated Yun Maojia. Yun Maojia put his hands behind his back, raised his chin, and revealed a proud expression. He only nodded calmly in response to Tan Kai's congratulations. Tan Kai's face stiffened, but he didn't approach Yun Maojia. He knew that the latter liked to show off. The closer he got, the more pretentious this guy would be. Therefore, he didn't intend to embarrass himself. Seeing that Tan Kai didn't continue to approach, Yun Maojia was a little displeased. However, he didn't intend to pursue the matter. Instead, he looked coldly at the rightmost pool. There was a white-robed youth sitting cross-legged in the pool, silently cultivating and absorbing the energy inside. Long Wen, you bastard! You bullied and humiliated me before. Now that I've broken through, I'll return everything you did to me in full detail. Yun Maojia grinned, then took a step towards Shuo Wen's pond. After breaking through, Yun Maojia was filled with confidence. He could feel that his strength had increased by a lot compared to before. He could vaguely feel a trace of the strength of a genius. Chapter 2451. 8 Steps of the Illusionary Sky. This guy really wants to take revenge. Tan Kai looked at Yun Maojia, who was rushing toward Zhuowen, and felt a little helpless. Although Yun Maojia's talent was indeed very high, Tan Kai didn't have any admiration for him. It was mainly because Yun Maojia's character wasn't very good. Qi Lan's beautiful eyes flickered. Although she wanted to stop him, she knew that she wasn't Yun Maojia's opponent even though she had made a breakthrough. Long Wen died. Before Yun Maojia reached the pool where Zhuowen was, his right hand had already formed a palm attack and fiercely attacked the figure in the pool. Bang! 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 The terrifying energy palm smashed into the pool like a mountain. Soon after, pillars of water soared into the sky and roared in all directions. Yun Maojia stood in the middle of the countless pillars of water. The corner of his mouth revealed a sinister smile as he looked down at the pool below. He didn't hold back at all in this palm attack. He knew that with his half-step illusionary sky 9 steps, even if he didn't kill Longwen, he could still severely injure him. After Longwen came out, he would teach him a lesson and let him know the consequences of offending him. Of course, since Longwen was a guest invited by Palace Master Jingyan, Yun Maojia didn't plan to kill him. He just wanted to teach him a lesson. Scram! A cold voice suddenly sounded. Soon after, an inconspicuous imperial jade seal suddenly flew out from the raging pillars of water below. As the imperial jade seal flew out, it constantly grew in size. In the end, it became 100 zhang tall and fiercely smashed towards Yun Maozhe. Yun Maozhe's pupils shrank. The moment the imperial jade seal smashed towards him, he felt the threat of death. He was completely flustered. Yun Maozhe roared and immediately took out his natal divine artifact, Cloud Vanishing Cloud. He used all his strength and heavily hacked at the imperial jade seal. Ding! A crisp sound accompanied by countless sparks rang out. Soon after, Yun Maozhe's pupils shrank as he discovered that his Cloud Vanishing Cloud was actually broken. His right hand that was holding the spear was twisted due to the huge force. Pucci! Yun Maozhe suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and then flew out, smashing into the soil not far away in an extremely sorry state, creating a huge pit. Qi Lan and Tan Kai stared blankly at this scene, their eyes filled with horror. They saw with their own eyes that Yun Maozhe's natal divine artifact, Cloud Vanishing, had been broken under the attack of the imperial jade seal. Yun Maozhe himself was lying in the huge pit, on the verge of death, as though he would die at any moment. The pillar of water gradually receded, and then Zhuowen, dressed in white, slowly stepped out of the void. He withdrew his right hand, and the phagocytosis shrunk to the size of a palm and landed in his palm. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze was extremely unfriendly as he stared coldly at the half-dead Yun Maozhe lying in the huge pit not far away. Just now, Zhuowen had already reached the most critical moment. Just when he was about to break through, Yun Maozhe's attack had directly interrupted him from his cultivation state, causing the aura he had worked so hard to break through to the next level to directly collapse and disappear without a trace. Zhuowen was very clear that if he wanted to gather the aura to break through again, he would have to spend a lot of time. There were only 5 days left in the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. The time was really too short. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's killing intent towards Yun Maozhe became even more intense. If it weren't for this guy, his breakthrough wouldn't have been in vain. This long one is really abnormal. He actually beat Yun Maozhe, who had broken through to the 9th step of the half-step virtual sky realm, into a half-dead state with just one move? Tan Kai swallowed his saliva and spat out these words while trembling with fear. Now, Tan Kai was truly terrified. He realized that the white-clothed youth before him was truly unfathomable. To be able to defeat Yun Maozhe in one move. Just how powerful did this guy have to be? Qi Lan was also shocked. Although she knew that Zhuowen was very strong, she didn't expect him to be so ridiculously strong. To be able to defeat a half-step virtual sky realm expert in one move, perhaps only a life-comprehending realm expert could do that. Could it be that this Zhuowen was actually a life-comprehending realm expert? You've ruined the timing of my advancement. You've done well. I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately, you're the one who provoked me. You can go in peace. Zhuowen's eyes surged with killing intent. With a wave of his sleeve, he planned to use the phagocytosis to thoroughly kill Yun Maozhe. Senior Brother Long, you mustn't. Qi Lan hurriedly said, If you kill Yun Maozhe, you will be wanted by the 6 Desires Palace. At that time, you won't be able to walk out of the 6 Desires Palace. After Qi Lan's reminder, Zhuowen calmed down. After all, Yun Maozhe was the eldest disciple of the Desire Palace. If he was killed like this, Palace Master Wu Ju would definitely not let him off. Yun Maozhe, I'm warning you. If you dare to disturb me again, even if I have to risk offending the 6 Desires Palace, I will kill you. After regaining his calm, Zhuowen threatened the half-dead Yun Maozhe and returned to the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Now that there wasn't much time left, he had to make every second count to regain the momentum he had gained from advancing. Otherwise, after leaving the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake, his advancement to the illusionary sky 8 steps would be far away. Yun Maozhe struggled to crawl out of the hole and spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale as he looked at the pool where Zhuowen was. His eyes were filled with fear. If he knew that Zhuowen's strength was so terrifying, he wouldn't have dared to provoke him even if he had 10 times the courage. After swallowing a healing pill, Yun Maozhe fell into his own pool. He swore in his heart that he would never provoke Zhuowen again. Qilan and Tan Kai were also frightened. The two of them didn't even dare to look at Zhuowen. They knew that it would be too easy for Zhuowen to kill the 4 of them. Another 3 days passed. There were still 2 days before the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake closed. Yao Xiangjuan finally broke through to the half-step virtual sky realm 9 steps. After successfully breaking through, Yao Xiangjuan glanced at the pool where Zhuowen was. When she saw that Zhuowen still hadn't broken through, her eyebrows immediately furrowed. According to her calculations, Zhuowen would definitely break through to the virtual sky realm 8 steps faster than her. Now that she had broken through, Zhuowen still hadn't broken through. It was really strange. Because Yao Xiangjuan was too focused on cultivation, the conflict between Zhuowen and Yun Maozhe didn't wake her up. Therefore, she didn't know that there was a fierce conflict between Zhuowen and Yun Maozhe. Another 2 days passed. Today was the last day. Yao Xiangjuan was also a little anxious. She was very clear that if Zhuowen still hadn't broken through, then it wouldn't be so easy for him to break through when he went out. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the originally quiet pool of Zhuowen was filled with countless splashes of water. Waves of water splashed everywhere as if there were a group of demons dancing wildly. Above the countless splashes of water, an incomparably huge purple virtual sky bridge floated in the air. This guy's virtual sky bridge is so huge. Yun Maozhe immediately noticed Zhuowen's virtual sky bridge and couldn't help but exclaim. Chapter 2452. Tearing force amidst the countless splashes, a white figure suddenly leaped up and landed on the 7th step of the enormous, illusory, heavenly bridge. Zhuowen looked at the last 2 steps that were still dim, but his eyes were filled with confidence. Now that he was about to step onto the 8th step, the 9th step was 1 step closer to him. Zhuowen was very clear that as long as his cultivation base could smoothly advance to the life-comprehending realm, then he would completely possess the qualifications to be on equal footing with the other lords of the heaven domains. He would also have a lot of authority to speak. One had to know that he planned to advance to the life-comprehending realm after comprehending the space-time law to perfection. Therefore, if he successfully advanced to the life-comprehending realm, his strength would not be comparable to ordinary life-comprehending realm cultivators. However, Zhuowen also knew that his path of advancement was destined to be much more difficult than ordinary cultivators. Zhuowen suddenly stepped onto the 8th step without any obstruction. An enormous 8th step of the illusory, heavenly bridge was completely lit up by Zhuowen. The moment Zhuowen stepped onto the 8th step, his entire body felt incomparably comfortable, as if his entire body had been reborn. He could also clearly feel that his strength had undergone a qualitative change after advancing to the 8th step of the illusory, heavenly bridge. If he did not rely on the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen might not be as good as a life-comprehending realm expert, but at least he would not be in such a sorry state when facing a life-comprehending realm expert like before. Of course, if he added the everlasting ice lotus and the mysterious death energy on his body, he would have the strength to fight a life-comprehending realm expert. Even if he encountered a weaker life-comprehending realm cultivator, Zhuowen would be completely defeated. After advancing to the 8th step of the illusory, heavenly bridge, Zhuowen did not continue. Instead, he landed on the illusory, heavenly bridge and put it away. Senior Brother Long, congratulations on advancing to the 8th step of the illusory, heavenly bridge. Yao Xiangjuan sincerely cupped her fists at Zhuowen. Zhuowen smiled slightly and sighed in his heart. He had finally advanced to the 8th step of the illusory, heavenly bridge. It could be said that advancing to the void sky 8 steps was a qualitative change for him. Of course, if he could reach the 9 steps void sky, then he would be reborn. However, this was only Zhuan's fantasy. Qi and Tan Kai also hurried forward to congratulate Zhuan. After knowing Zhuan's strength, the two of them had the intention to befriend him. After all, Zhuan's strength was truly rare. They could foresee that Zhuan's future potential would be limitless. On the other hand, Yun Maozhi stood in a corner and looked at Zhuan with fear in his eyes. He didn't dare to approach Zhuan. Zhuan merely glanced at Yun Maozhi and did not pay much attention to him. From the very beginning, he had not paid much attention to Yun Maozhi. After all, the gap between the two of them was too great. At this moment, Desireless, who was seated cross-legged not far away, slowly stood up. Without saying a word, she brushed past the five of them. Then, she slowly walked forward. "What's she doing?" Zhuan asked in astonishment. "It's almost time for the 6 Desires, Heavenly Lake. Desireless is planning to bring us out of here. We just need to follow behind her," Yao Xiangjuan explained with a smile. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. Soon after, the 5 of them tacitly followed behind Desireless. Desireless arrived at a white circle of light that was several meters wide. With a single glance, Zhuan could tell that this circle of light was a teleportation array. After the 5 of them stood still, Desireless formed a seal with her hands. Soon after, everyone was enveloped in white light and a teleportation power spread out around them. After roughly 20 breaths of time, Zhuan discovered that he was still inside the circle of light. At the same time, a terrifying tearing force enveloped his body. It seemed as though it wanted to ruthlessly tear him to pieces. Zhuan discovered that something was wrong. He discovered that the tearing force in the surrounding white light was becoming more and more terrifying. Ah, no. A miserable shriek came from beside Zhuan. Zhuan was resisting the tearing force with great difficulty. With great difficulty, he managed to form his divine sense. Then he discovered that Tan Kai, who was beside him, had actually been torn to pieces by the tearing force. Blood splattered all over the place. The instant Tan Kai was torn apart, Qi also spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale and her body started to distort. Zhuan's eyes flickered. With a cold snort, he immediately took out the phagocytosis. It turned into a mountain-like giant and blocked Qi-Lan's surroundings. With the protection of the phagocytosis, Qi-Lan, who was originally on the verge of dying, was barely able to keep her life. With great difficulty, Qi-Lan turned her head around and nodded gratefully at Zhuan. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. "Puchi!" At that moment, a bloody hole immediately appeared on Zhuan's right shoulder. That was because he was unable to endure the terrifying tearing power. That was why the powerful tearing wound appeared. Zhuan hurriedly operated his divine power. Only then was he able to resist the tearing force. However, he knew that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. The tearing force was too terrifying. Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhi were relatively stronger. As such, they were barely able to hold on. At this moment, Desireless didn't say a single word. He stood at the front and extended his slender, jade-like hand. Suddenly, the terrifying tearing force weakened a lot. Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhi, who were bitterly holding on, finally relaxed a lot. As for Zhuan, he withdrew the phagocytosis from his palm and looked ahead with a grave expression. Yao Xiangjuan and Qi-Lan arrived beside Zhuan. As for Yun Maozhi, he also approached them. However, he didn't dare to get too close to Zhuan. Exactly what's going on? What a terrifying tearing force! Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes revealed a terrified expression as she spoke. Zhuan shook his head. Even he didn't know exactly what was going on. This strange tearing force had suddenly appeared in the teleportation array. It was as though some terrifying force had bombarded the teleportation array during the teleportation. Boom! 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 The terrifying sound waves became even denser. The source of the sound waves was on the other side of the teleportation array. At this moment, Desireless' slender, jade-like hand seals were constantly forming hand seals. Surging energy surged out and blocked the terrifying tearing force coming from the other side of the teleportation array. At the same time, Desireless dutifully led the group of 4 forward. As they got closer to the source of the teleportation array, Zhuowen discovered that the rumbling sounds in his ears had become even denser. It was as though experts were fighting intensely. Zhuowen wasn't unfamiliar with this sound. Yao Xiangjuan and the others also revealed shocked expressions. Clearly, they had also heard the sounds of fighting. Someone actually dared to invade the 6 Desires Palace. How audacious! Yun Maozhe said in a low voice with a gloomy expression. Exactly what's going on. We'll know once we get out. Yao Xiangjuan said indifferently. Rip. Desireless, jade-like hand suddenly made a grabbing motion in front of her, forcibly tearing the obstruction of the teleportation array into pieces. Soon after, she led the group out of the teleportation array. Zhuowen surveyed his surroundings and discovered that they were still in a desolate region. Clearly, they had really come out of the teleportation array. However, at this moment, the desolate region was even more desolate and dilapidated than before. Many dim stars had been destroyed beyond recognition and had turned into ruins. Chapter 2453. Old Lord Tishita Boom. Boom! Boom! Another ear-piercing boom resounded. Not far away from the desolate region, 2 figures were constantly exchanging blows. One of the women wore a white robe and held a horsetail whisk. Zhuowen was familiar with her. She was Wu Ju, the palace master of Desire Palace. As for the figure that was fighting with Palace Master Wu Jue, it was a strong man who wore beast skin and his arms were exposed. He was as strong as a ferocious tiger. Even Zhuowen felt his heart skip a beat when he sensed the aura emitted by this muscular man. Furthermore, to be able to fight Palace Master Wu Ju to such an extent, Zhuowen knew that this man was definitely an expert of the extreme realm of life and death. However, Zhuowen found it strange that although the 6 Desires Heavenly Domain was one of the top 3 heavenly domains, there shouldn't be 2 experts in the extreme realm of life and death. Moreover, looking at the battle between the man in beast skin and Palace Master Wu Ju, he knew that the man in beast skin should be an enemy of the 6 Desires Palace. Zhuowen saw the other 5 palace masters in another place, where the man in animal skin was fighting with Palace Master Wu Ju. However, the 5 palace masters were looking at an old man with a long white beard in front of them as if they were facing a great enemy. The old man wore a black and white robe, and his hair was tied up in a bun. He also held a horsetail whisk in his hand. However, the horsetail whisk was completely different from Palace Master Wu Ju's. The horsetail whisk's hair was black and white instead of pure white. It's old Lord Tishita of Tishita Palace and Yama Palace's Yama Palace. These 2 old men. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes were gloomy. Why did people from Tishita Palace and Yama Palace come to our 6 Desires Palace? Moreover, they are fighting the palace master directly. Qi Lan's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. Yun Maozhe's eyes were gloomy and cold, but he remained silent. Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat. When the Tishita Palace was mentioned, Zhuowen immediately knew that the old man should be the master of the Tishita heavenly domain. As for the man in beast skin, he should be the master of the Yama heavenly domain. Zhuowen had only heard of these 2 heavens before. They were part of the 8 heavens, but he had never been there. Today, within the 6 Desires Palace, he was able to see the lords of these 2 heavens. After Desireless brought Zhuowen and the others out, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. As for Palace Master Wu Ju, she coldly snorted and furiously swept out the horsetail whisk in her hand. It turned into a boundless white ocean that knocked back the beast-skin man. After that, Palace Master Wu Ju landed beside Desireless. The other 5 palace masters also retreated and joined Palace Master Wu Jue. They stared at the old man and the man in animal skin with fear. "Are you guys all right?" Although Palace Master Wu Jue said so, she only looked at Yun Maozhe and Yao Xiangjuan with concern. Zhuowen walked to the side of Palace Master Jingyan, while Qi Lan returned to the back of Palace Master Huating. "Where's Tan Kai?" Palace Master Xianglan of the Fragrant Desire Palace did not see Tan Kai's figure and realized that something was amiss. She immediately asked. Yao Xiangjuan said in a somewhat apologetic manner, "Marshal and Xianglan, when the 5 of us were teleporting back, something unexpected happened. A frightening tearing power was transmitted from the teleportation. Senior brother Tan Kai was the first to be struck by it." Yao Xiangjuan did not finish her words. She knew that Xianglan would understand what was going on. Grief appeared in Xianglan's eyes. After all, Tan Kai was the head disciple of their Fragrant Desire Palace. Yet he had actually died in such a manner. How could she not be furious? "Yemazi, old Lord Tusada, the 2 of you will die miserably." Xianglan vented her anger and cursed at the old man and the man in animal skin. However, regardless of whether it was old Lord Tusada or young me, they did not take Xianglan's curses to heart. The 2 of them were experts in the life and death realm. Thus, they did not take Xianglan, a life comprehension realm expert, to heart. Instead, the 2 of them looked toward Palace Master Wujue. "Palace Master Wujue, I always thought that Desireless was a groundless person. I never expected that you would really nurture a desireless person. However, I pity the vessel of this desireless person. In the end, it might become a wedding dress for someone else." Old Lord Tusada looked at Desireless, who was standing beside Palace Master Wujue. His turbid eyes shone brightly. Soon after, he ridiculed Desireless. Palace Master Wujue's eyes flickered. However, she sneered and said, "Old Lord Tusada, why did the 2 of you target me the moment you arrived? I don't remember my 6 Desires Palace offending your Tusada Palace and Yama Palace, right?" Old Lord Tusada chuckled and said, "Don't talk about us. It was Yemazi who attacked you the moment he arrived. I'm a person who doesn't like to fight. As for Yemazi, it might be because he hasn't fought for so long that his hands are itching." The corners of Palace Master Wujue's eyes couldn't help but twitch when she heard this reason. However, she quickly calmed down. Palace Master Wujue and the other 5 Palace Masters had naturally come here to welcome Yao Xiangjuan's group. However, just as they arrived, Yema, Z, and old Lord Tusada suddenly appeared. Yema, Z was like a mad dog. He immediately pounced at Palace Master Wujue and started fighting with her. As for the teleportation process that Zhuo Wen and the others were in, they were affected by the shock waves from the battle between Yema Z and Palace Master Wujue. That was why such a change occurred. If it wasn't for Desireless, they would have been unable to leave. Palace Master Wujue also knew that Yema Z's sudden attack was definitely planned. His goal was to show her his strength. "What is your goal?" Palace Master Wujue couldn't help but ask. If it was only old Lord Tusada or Yema Z, Palace Master Wujue wouldn't be afraid. However, 2 life and death realm experts had suddenly appeared. This was especially true for old Lord Tusada. This old man was extremely cunning. Moreover, his cultivation was even higher than hers. Even Palace Master Wujue couldn't help but feel nervous when facing these 2 people. Old Lord Tusada grinned and said, "Palace Master Wujue, our request is very simple. It's the desireless cultivation technique. Of course, if you give me this desireless directly, I won't mind." Palace Master Wujue sneered and said, "The desireless cultivation technique is the strongest cultivation technique of my 6 Desires Palace. Why should I give it to you?" Old Lord Tusada didn't mind at all and said indifferently, "Palace Master Wujue, don't worry. I won't take your desireless cultivation technique for free. I'll take out a corresponding item to exchange with you. The price definitely won't disappoint you." Palace Master Wujue mocked. "All right, Doesn't your Tusita Palace have a divine proof pill? If you give me that divine proof pill, I'll give you the desireless cultivation technique." As soon as Palace Master Wujua said this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He didn't expect the Tusita Palace to have a divine proof pill. It was said that the divine proof pill could increase the chances of reaching the Tao. It was something that all life and death realm experts yearned for even in their dreams. At present, Zhuowen had never seen a divine proof pill. However, he didn't expect the Tusita Palace to have such a divine proof pill. Chapter 2454. Spring and Snow Palace Master Wujua sneered. The desireless cultivation technique was left behind by the founder of my 6 Desires Palace. It contains the secret of Tao affirmation. I know you want the secret of Tao affirmation, but you don't even want to exchange the Tao affirmation divine pill. Do you think I'll give you the desireless cultivation technique? Old Lord Tusita smiled faintly. Do you think you have any other choice? Your 6 Desires Palace won't be able to stop me and Yamazi. That's not necessarily true. Palace Master Wujua's eyes were gloomy. He ordered the 5 Palace Masters to leave as soon as possible and return to 6 Desires Palace. Then he threw out the horsetail whisk in his hand at old Lord Tusita. However, Yamazi sneered and intercepted Palace Master Wujua. Then, the 2 of them started fighting again. The battle between the 2 extreme life and death realm experts was absolutely shocking. Even Zhuowen felt his heart skip a beat as he watched from the side. Zhuowen knew very well that if he were to face such an expert, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow and would die without a doubt. "Let's leave this place quickly," Palace Master Jing Yun hurriedly said. Then she took out a flying divine tool and left with Zhuowen in a stream of light. The other Palace Masters also took out their flying divine tools. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Take this old man with you. As long as you hand over the desireless cultivation technique, this old man will give each of you a life or death pill." Old Lord Tusita's voice was faintly discernible and instantly appeared in their ears. It was as if old Lord Tusita was whispering in their ears. Zhuowen was shocked. He thought that old Lord Tusita was really rich. He actually wanted to give out 5 life or death pills. One must know that he had risked his life to obtain the life or death pill from the divine pill secret realm. It was also partly due to luck. From old Lord Tusita's tone, one could tell that this old man didn't care about the life or death pill too much. After hearing about the life or death pill, the 5 Palace Masters hesitated for a moment. However, they still suppressed the impulse in their hearts and left this place. "Sai, looks like you guys are refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. In that case, I have no choice but to use crude means to make you guys obedient." Old Lord Tusita sighed softly and continued to hover in the air. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand, and instantly 2 streams of black and white energy surged out. The 2 streams of black and white energy swirled around each other, then transformed into an enormous black and white flood dragon that was 3,000 meters long. Tao Lord Tusita stood atop the flood dragon, which roared and shot forward in pursuit of the 5 palace lords. Rumble. Unfortunately, the moment the black and white flood dragons flew out, they were blocked by a slender figure. Desireless, slender body blocked the black and white flood dragon's path. Her slender, jade-like hands began to form hand seals, and countless traces of Tao surged out from her body, causing the black and white flood dragon to completely stop in midair. Tao Lord Tusita silently looked at Desireless before him with eyes filled with admiration. He muttered in a low voice, "This Desireless is truly perfect. He's actually so compatible with the heavenly Tao. He's clearly only at the life comprehension realm, yet he's so powerful." Unfortunately, Desireless core Tao has been grasped by Wujua. If that wasn't the case, I would have snatched this perfect Desireless and nurtured him myself. Tao Lord Tusada shook his head and looked at Desireless before him, a trace of pity appearing in his eyes. Bang! Tao Lord Tusada casually swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. Instantly, the black and white energies transformed into countless lines that bombarded Desireless. Bang! Desireless let out a muffled groan and couldn't help but retreat. The traces of Tao circulating around his body were sliced into pieces by the black and white lines. Many holes appeared on the linen clothes on his body, from which cherry-red blood flowed out. He appeared to be in an extremely sorry state. However, this Desireless wasn't simple at all. With a light wave of his lily-white hand, countless traces of Tao energy revolved around his body and condensed into a sparkling and translucent zither. Desireless, slender, and jade-like hands rapidly strummed the zither strings. Instantly, terrifying traces of Tao energy surged out like waves along with the zither music. Extremely sharp killing intent was contained within the zither music. The black and white lines that were originally unstoppable, like a hot knife through butter, were completely annihilated by the zither music that contained killing intent. This is spring white snow? Wu Jua, that madman, actually gave the heaven-crushing source fragment, spring white snow, to this Desireless. Isn't that guy afraid of a backlash? Tao Lord Tusada's expression finally changed. The zither music grew louder and louder, and the killing intent soared into the sky. It was as though the entire area had turned into a terrifying battlefield in an instant, as all kinds of sounds of battle rang out incessantly. On the flying-type divine tool, Zhuowen had been paying attention to the battle behind him the entire time. When his gaze landed on the zither in Desireless' hand, his pupils abruptly shrank. Although this zither was formed by Tao energy, Zhuowen was able to tell with a single glance that the appearance of this zither was too similar to the zither that Moyin Wushang had held in his hand when he had parted ways with him. Junior sister Qilan, did the song A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix that you played back then come from Desireless? Zhuowen looked at Qilan, who was standing behind Palace Master Huating, and asked through voice transmission. His voice contained an unquestionable tone. Qilan's beautiful eyes flickered, but she remained silent. Junior sister Qilan, please tell me. Zhuowen said in a very serious manner. Qilan sighed softly. Originally, she didn't want to answer Zhuowen. However, when she recalled that Zhuowen had saved her life before, she truly couldn't bear to refuse his request. Senior Brother-Long, I indeed heard that song from Desireless. However, I don't think she's the friend you're talking about, right? Qilan said with uncertainty. Zhuowen's heart sank. He continued, did she willingly become a Desireless? That should be the case. After all, cultivating the Desireless cultivation technique has a very high probability of successfully validating one's Tao. Otherwise, it's impossible for someone to willingly abandon the 6 desires and become a Desireless without any perception. Qilan replied through voice transmission. Zhuowen sneered. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he leaped out of the flying-type divine tool. He was very clear about Moyin Wushang's character. She wasn't someone who truly had the ambition to reach the peak. Even though she had cultivated with all her might, it was only to help him. How could such a stubborn girl abandon the 6 desires and pursue the illusory, heavenly Tao? Abandoning the 6 desires was equivalent to forgetting Zhuowen. She wouldn't even be able to perceive him. Zhuowen was now even more certain that Moyin Wushang didn't willingly become a Desireless. Moreover, when Moyin Wushang parted ways with him, she played the song A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix. Now, she was playing it again in the 6 Desires Palace. This meant that she was still reluctant to part with this world. She was also using the zither to resist her current fate. Chapter 2455. Yin-Yang Pisces Longwen, come back! Palace Master Jing Yin quickly noticed Zhuowen, who jumped out of the flying divine tool. She could not help but reach out with her right hand in an attempt to grab Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen kicked with both legs and cleverly dodged Palace Master Jingyan's grab. Palace Master Jingyan, thank you for bringing me to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Now that this matter is over, we don't owe each other anything. See you again. After saying that, Zhuowen turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the spot. Palace Master Jingyan stared blankly at the disappearing figure. Soon after, she felt a little dispirited. Originally, she thought that Zhuowen was someone who valued relationships and loyalty. Now that he chose to leave at this critical juncture, Palace Master Jingyan's opinion of Zhuowen changed a lot. Jingyan, long when left just like that. I'm afraid that he saw that our Six Desires Palace is in trouble and fled first. Should we capture him? Palace Master Xianglan said gloomily. Palace Master Jingyan shook her head and said, Forget it. This time, I brought him to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake to return a favor. Now that I've returned his favor, we don't owe each other anything in the future. Just ignore him. Since Palace Master Jingyan had already said so, Palace Master Xianglan naturally had nothing else to say. Hence, the group continued to fly towards the Six Desires Palace. On the flying divine tool, Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes were locked. She sighed softly and did not say anything. Although she was somewhat disappointed by Zhuowen's decision to flee at the last moment, she felt that Zhuowen wasn't such a person. Perhaps Big Brother Zhuo has other important matters to attend to. That's why he's in a hurry to leave. Yao Xiangjuan could not help but comfort herself. In the desolate region, the battle between Palace Master Wujue and Yamazi was getting more and more intense. The battle between the two extremes of life and death was too terrifying. Every move they made could annihilate countless stars. If one looked carefully, Yamazi was still slightly inferior. At this moment, he was being suppressed by Palace Master Wujue. It would not be long before he was defeated. Although both of them were at the extremes of life and death, there was still a difference in strength between them. Even if one's cultivation level was the same, one's strength would not be the same. While Palace Master Wujue was suppressing Yamazi, she also noticed the battle on the other side. The battle between Sage, Lord Tusada, and Desireless had reached its climax. Although the battle between Old Lord Tusada and Desireless appeared to be evenly matched, Palace Master Wujue's heart sank. He knew very well that Old Lord Tusada was very powerful and even stronger than him. Only he had yet to use his full strength. If Old Lord Tusada were to use his full strength, Desireless would likely be destroyed. Palace Master Wujue gritted her teeth. Her attacks became increasingly fierce. She planned to defeat Yamazi as soon as possible and then take Desireless away. This Desireless was the first woman to have such a high compatibility with the Desireless cultivation technique. If she were to destroy this Desireless, it would be very difficult for her to find another Desireless who was as perfect as him. At this moment, Old Lord Tusada was waving his horsetail, whisk non-stop. However, he had a relaxed expression on his face. On the other hand, Desireless was having a very difficult time resisting his attacks. His lily-white hands were rapidly playing the zither. Frightening amounts of Taoist rhymes erupted from his zither and blocked the attacks of Old Lord Tusada's horsetail whisk. I'm not going to play with you anymore. Desireless, your Desireless cultivation technique has yet to reach perfection. Although your strength is pretty good, it's still far from enough. Old Lord Tusada lightly smiled. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, countless amounts of black and white energies immediately turned into two black and white fishes. The head and tail of the two fishes were connected to each other. Then they started to rapidly spin and shoot out. Desireless hands started to play the zither even faster. His Taoist rhymes started to violently surge forth like a tide. Unfortunately, even though Desireless Taoist rhymes were very powerful, they were completely useless against the black and white fishes. When the Taoist rhymes collided with the black and white fishes, they were easily neutralized. Desireless still had an expressionless face. He held his zither with both hands and tapped the air with his feet. While retreating, he continued to attack the black and white fishes. He hoped that he would be able to neutralize the might of the black and white fishes with his attacks. Unfortunately, the black and white fishes were truly too frightening. Desireless attacks were unable to stop the black and white fishes at all. Thus, Desireless could only continuously retreat. Although Desireless did not have any desires and did not even have any perception, his divine sense was terrifyingly powerful. Thus, he knew how frightening the black and white fishes were. He had a premonition that if he were to be struck by the black and white fishes, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. Old Lord Tusada, you actually took out a heaven-crushing source energy? Old man, you. Palace Master Wujue, who was originally fighting against Yamazi, also noticed what was happening, especially when he saw the black and white fishes. His pupils shrunk to the extreme. He couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The heaven-crushing source energy fragment of the Tusada heavenly domain was called the yin-yang pill fish. Its might was not the slightest bit inferior to the heaven-crushing source energy of the six desires heavenly domain, the spring white snow. Furthermore, due to old Lord Tusada being extremely proficient in using the yin-yang pill fish, the might of the yin-yang pill fish was naturally much greater than Palace Master Wujue's. Originally Desireless, who was compatible with the heavenly Tao, would be able to display an extremely powerful might when using the spring white snow. However, Desireless cultivation was still too low. There was still a gap between him and old Lord Tusada. Even though the spring white snow was being controlled by Desireless, it was still at a disadvantage when fighting against an old fox like old Lord Tusada. Zhuowen was hidden in the darkness of the starry sky. As he looked at the yin-yang pill fish used by old Lord Tusada, his heart involuntarily started to beat wildly. The yin-yang pill fish looked very ordinary. However, for some unknown reason, it gave Zhuowen an extremely dangerous feeling. This feeling of danger was very strong. It was as if Zhuowen was an insignificant ant in front of the yin-yang pill fish, and the yin-yang pill fish was a vast mountain. Is this the Tusada heaven domain's heaven-crushing source energy? Zhuowen naturally heard Palace Master Wujue's words. He didn't expect old Lord Tusada to take out the heaven-crushing source energy so quickly. Actually, what Zhuowen didn't know was that the reason old Lord Tusada took out the heaven-crushing source energy was because Desireless had taken out the spring white snow from the very beginning. The sparkling and translucent zither in Desireless' hand was formed from the spring white snow. Whoever started the trouble should end it. If one wanted to defeat a cultivator with the heaven-crushing source energy, they naturally had to use the heaven-crushing source energy. At this moment, old Lord Tusada was still rejoicing that Desireless wasn't very proficient in using the spring white snow. Therefore, he was able to suppress Desireless by using the heaven-crushing source energy. Seeing the black and white fish getting closer and closer to Desireless, Zhuowen started to feel somewhat anxious. He really wanted to rush out and save Desireless. However, Zhuowen knew that even though his current strength wasn't bad, the four people in front of him were all much stronger than him. If he rushed over now, he would simply be throwing his life away. Perhaps he would die on the spot before he could save Desireless. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that old Lord Tusada, who was controlling the black and white fish, would occasionally look in his direction. Perhaps old Lord Tusada had already discovered him. However, old Lord Tusada didn't place him in his eyes. Chapter 2456. Tao proving Tulzhua when heaved a sigh of relief. He was certain that old Lord Tusada had already noticed him when he'd arrived. Fortunately, old Lord Tusada did not pay too much attention to him. After all, he knew that his cultivation was nothing in old Lord Tusada's eyes. Bang! The black and white fishes finally arrived before Desireless. With no other choice, Desireless formed hand seals and controlled the zither in his hand to violently smash against the black and white fishes. The collision between the two great essences was extremely powerful. Large swaths of the starry sky were destroyed, forming a black hole that grew larger and larger. All of the stars, meteorites, and other materials in the surrounding starry sky were annihilated into nothingness. Palace Master Wu Ju and Yema, Z, who were originally fighting, could not help but stop their battle. The two of them distanced themselves from this region in shock. Looking at the terrifying destructive power, they were both stupefied. They never imagined that the collision between the two great essences would actually cause such a terrifying might. Furthermore, the shock waves from the collision were rapidly spreading from the original desolate region to the rest of the Six Desires star field. At the instant when the two great essences collided, Zhuowen immediately took out the space-time wheel and rushed towards Desireless, who was sent flying. Zhuowen grabbed Desireless' slender waist. Without the slightest hesitation, he controlled the space-time wheel and fled into the distance. Unfortunately, he had truly underestimated the shock waves from the collision between the two great essences. The instant he saved Desireless, the shock waves from the collision had already reached him. Immediately, Zhuowen took out all of the defensive methods he had on him. However, it only took an instant for all of his defensive methods to be turned into nothingness the instant they came into contact with the shock waves. Even the surface of the phagocytosis was covered in extremely deep and terrifying cracks. This gave Zhuowen quite a fright. The phagocytosis was King Devourer's life treasure. Its toughness was definitely close to that of a Tao-confirming divine weapon. Yet, cracks had started to appear on it from the shock waves. Fortunately, this phagocytosis bought Zhuowen some time. Zhuowen activated the space-time wheel and retrieved the cracked phagocytosis. Then, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared. What shocked Zhuowen was that the space-time wheel's speed was very fast, but the ripples spread even faster. They caught up with the space-time wheel in an instant. Zhuowen was affected by a small ripple. He groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. This was only a small ripple. If he was caught up by the remaining ripples, he would not be able to survive. At the thought of this, Zhuowen took out the space-time core without hesitation and pressed it into the space-time wheel. Suddenly, the space-time wheel's speed increased greatly. The ripples that were about to catch up with the space-time wheel were gradually left behind. In just 10 breaths, the space-time wheel had left the Six Desires star field. Turning around, Zhuowen discovered that the terrifying shock waves were spreading out from the center of the desolate region. It actually covered 30% of the Six Desires star zone. Zhuowen knew that the star field that was covered by the ripples would probably be completely destroyed. The cultivators in the star field would definitely not be spared. Moreover, Zhuowen also found that the Six Desires Palace was also affected by the ripples. Although he was a little worried about Palace Master Jingyun and Yao Shangjuan, he knew that he could not even protect himself now. He definitely could not care so much. After all, the Six Desires Palace was the pillar of the entire sky region. It could not be destroyed so easily. Inside the Six Desires Palace, there must be extremely powerful defensive measures. Is this the heaven-breaking origin? It's really powerful. The scene of the two fragments of the heaven-breaking origin colliding was still vivid in Zhuowen's mind. He would probably never be able to forget it for the rest of his life. As for Zhuowen, he finally experienced how terrifying the heaven-breaking origin was. Moreover, this was only a fragment of the heaven-breaking origin. If it was the complete heaven-breaking origin, how terrifying would it be? Zhuowen looked at Desireless, who was in his arms. He sighed and said, "If you are really desireless, I will help you recover your original appearance, no matter what." After saying that, Zhuowen's gaze turned gloomy. He was now certain that Moyan Wushang had not become desireless willingly. Instead, it was Palace Master Wujua who had forced him to do so. "Little brat, you are not simple. You actually have the space-time disc of the space-time master. No, this is not a space-time disk. It should be a space-time divine tool that was refined from a space-time disk. An indifferent voice suddenly sounded. After that, Zhuowen felt the space-time will shake violently. Soon after, he and Moyen Wushang were ruthlessly thrown out. The instant they were thrown out, Zhuowen immediately stored the space-time wheel into his spiritual ring. After that, he pointed his right hand at the void and immediately used the space-time divine ability, Ocean's Waning Sunday. The space-time energy turned into a huge space-time ocean. At the end of the space-time ocean, a bizarre waning sun rose. In an instant, the space around Zhuowen was enveloped by the space-time energy. Asterisk bang. Asterisk a figure was caught off guard and was forced out of the starry sky by the space-time energy. Only then did Zhuowen discover that the owner of the voice was old Lord Tusada. He did not expect that old Lord Tusada would chase after them while dealing with spring white snow. It seemed that this old man had his eyes on Moyen Wushang. "Senior, I have no enmity with you. Why are you chasing after me?" Zhuowen stood in the space-time ocean and stared vigilantly at old Lord Tusada. Then he cupped his fists and asked in a deep voice. Old Lord Tusada looked at the space-time ocean surrounding Zhuowen with a strange expression. He did not expect that this little guy before him not only possessed the space-time wheel, but also comprehended the space-time divine ability. This was somewhat amazing. Indeed, this old man possesses neither grievances nor hatred with you. However, of all things, you shouldn't have abducted Desireless. Furthermore, you abducted him from this old man's hands. Tell me, if I don't hunt you down, who should I hunt down? Old Monarch Tusada said indifferently. Although old Lord Tusada's tone was extremely calm, Zhuowen could feel a chilling killing intent. This old man's killing intent had already locked onto him. As long as Zhuowen showed any signs of escaping, this old man would not hesitate to kill him. Zhuowen cupped his fists again and asked respectfully, Senior, may I ask why you are chasing after Desireless? She doesn't seem to have offended you. Old Lord Tusada said indifferently, This Desireless is that old woman Wu Jua's tool to prove her Tao. If that old woman succeeds in proving her Tao, I, her old neighbor, will definitely be killed by that old woman as an example to others. I will not allow that to happen. Tool to prove her Tao? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Chapter 2457. Daunting, but not danger. Zhuowen secretly took out the blood jade and looked at old man Tusada with vigilance. The blood jade was given to him by the mysterious head in the blood-stained cliff. It was said that this item could help him escape from a life and death crisis. The mysterious head was a Tao confirming expert when it was alive. Therefore, the blood jade it gave was definitely not simple. Zhuowen didn't dare to be careless when facing old man Tusada, who was a life and death realm expert. Senior, Desireless is my best friend. Only now did I know that she has become a Desireless of the Six Desires Palace. This is also the reason why this junior is willing to risk his life to save her. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, Old Lord Tishita looked at Zhuowen in astonishment. His gaze was filled with a strange color as he said, She's actually your best friend. You're really too unlucky. Desireless is truly powerless to reverse the situation. It's basically impossible to return to the past. Moreover, that old hag Wujua must have some sort of trump card in order to control Desireless. You don't need to do something superfluous. I'll help you kill her. Senior, forgive me for not being able to comply. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. His right hand suddenly pointed down, and the sun in the sky suddenly fell and heavily smashed towards old man Tusada. Old Lord Tishita frowned slightly. He really couldn't understand why a mere 8 steps void sky ant would dare to attack him, an expert of the two extremes of life and death. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. Old man Tusada sneered. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and smashed it against the sun. Then, Zhuowen's pupil shrunk. he discovered that the powerful sun had actually been smashed into countless specks of light by the Horsetail whisk. However, the sun wasn't completely useless. Old Man Tusida's movements also paused for a moment because of this. Zhuowen took advantage of this moment to immediately carry Moyin of Wushan and fly forward. At the same time, the torch dragon wings on his back unfolded and turned into a bolt of lightning. Old Lord Tusida sneered and gently stroked the horsetail whisk in his hand. A wave of black and white energy transformed into an endless rope that shot out and wrapped around Zhuowen. Zhuowen took out the king's sword and suddenly activated the death chi on the surface. He ruthlessly slashed at the rope and actually cut it apart. This guy actually has death chi. Old Lord Tusida let out a soft cry of surprise and immediately summoned his horsetail whisk. The white hairs at the front of the whisk transformed into a boundless wall, blocking Zhuowen's path forward. Zhuowen turned around and stared coldly at the slowly approaching Old Lord Tusida. He began to grip the blood jade in his hand tightly. He hoped that the mysterious head hadn't lied to him and that the power of the blood jade could really stop Old Lord Tusida. Old Lord Tusida also noticed the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand. His casual look suddenly turned serious, and his footsteps came to a halt. "What are you holding in your hand?" Old Lord Tusida's eyes flickered. At his level of cultivation, there was basically nothing that could cause him to feel a great sense of danger. However, the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand was an exception. Old Lord Tusida actually felt an extremely strong sense of danger from the blood rain. This was the first time in countless years that Old Lord Tusida felt such a strong sense of danger, so he subconsciously asked. Zhuowen took a deep breath and said, "Senior, I obtained this blood jade by accident from the corpse of a dead expert who had attained the Tao." Zhuowen didn't say much and stopped there. He knew that the reputation of a Tao affirmation expert was greater than anything else. It was enough to make Old Lord Tusida apprehensive. He only had one chance to obtain the blood jade. If he could use it to make Old Lord Tusida cower, then it couldn't be better. After all, he had no enmity with Old Lord Tusida. If he had no other choice, he really didn't want to make an enemy of such an expert. Old Lord Tusida narrowed his eyes and said excitedly, "Where did you see the remains of a Tao affirmation expert? Tell me." Zhuowen's eyes flickered, and he said in a deep voice, "As long as you let me go, I won't mind telling you. If you still don't intend to let me go, then I can only activate this blood jade and fight with my life on the line." Old Lord Tusida calmed down and looked at the blood jade in fear. He knew that Zhuowen wasn't lying. At his level of cultivation, there was nothing that could threaten him unless it was something of a Tao affirmation expert. Since this blood jade could make him feel such a strong sense of danger, it couldn't be anything other than something of a Tao affirmation expert. After pondering for a moment, Old Lord Tusida nodded and said, "I can let you go, but Desireless is a scourge. Palace Master Wuju's method is buried in his body. Taking him away is equivalent to letting Palace Master Wuju know your location." Speaking up to this point, Old Lord Tusida took out a jade box and threw it to Zhuowen, saying, "This jade box contains a kind of medicinal powder that can block the imprints of life and death experts. However, it has a time limit. I advise you to take Desireless and leave the 6 desires heavenly domain. That way, that old hag Wu Ju won't be able to find you." Zhuowen took the jade box and scanned it with his divine sense. He found that it was indeed a medicinal powder. However, he wasn't sure if this medicinal powder was real, so he had to go to the pill tower to verify it. "Thank you, Senior. The location of the Tao affirmation expert is recorded in this jade slip. If Senior wants to go there, you can go there according to the records in this jade slip." Zhuowen took out a jade slip and threw it to Old Lord Tusida. Then he took out the space-time wheel and immediately left this place. Old Lord Tusida took the jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. He frowned slightly and said, "It's actually the space-time quicksand river. The space-time disk shattered there. I didn't expect to find the remains of a Tao affirmation expert after leaving the space-time disk. I have to go there and take a look." Zhuowen didn't lie to old Lord Tusada. However, what was in the deepest part of the space-time quicksand river wasn't the remains of a Tao affirmation expert, but a Tao affirmation expert who was still alive. Although it was only a head, its strength shouldn't be much weaker than old Lord Tusada. At this moment, the explosion in the Six Desires heavenly domain finally came to an end. Old Lord Tusada took a step forward and re-entered the desolate domain. His yin-yang pill fish was still fighting with spring white snow, so he couldn't just ignore it. As soon as old Lord Tusada entered the desolate domain, he saw that Yamazi was seriously injured and flying backwards. Palace Master Wujua was holding spring, white snow, and constantly plucking the zither strings. She was planning to kill Yamazi in one fell swoop. Old Lord Tusada naturally wouldn't let this happen. He urged the yin-yang pill fish to fall to the side and blocked all of Palace Master Wujua's attacks. Old Lord Tusada wears Desireless. Palace Master Wujua took a few steps back and asked old Lord Tusada with eyes that were spitting fire. Old Lord Tusada smiled faintly and said, "As long as you hand over the Desireless cultivation technique, I'll tell you Desireless whereabouts." Palace Master Wujua sneered. Desireless had her mark on him. As long as Desireless was still alive, she could find him. Chapter 2458. Cunning. Palace Master Wujua's pupils shrunk. She immediately tried to sense the imprint on Desireless' body. Indeed, it was as old Lord Tusada had said. She had indeed lost the connection with the imprint. "You old bastard!" Palace Master Wujua was furious. However, she did not attack again. Old Lord Tusada's strength was not inferior to hers. Furthermore, he was even more proficient in using the yin-yang pill fish in his hand. If she were to continue fighting, she would definitely suffer. Furthermore, when Palace Master Wujua fought against Yamazi, although she managed to injure Yamazi, she had also suffered serious injuries. If she were to fight against old Lord Tusada now, she would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage. The corners of old Lord Tusada's mouth curled into a smile. He said, "Palace Master Wujua, I believe that you're a smart person. I don't want the original 6 Desires cultivation technique from you. I only want you to give me a copy of it. After that, I'll give you the whereabouts of Desireless." Palace Master Wujua's long, shapely eyebrows slightly creased. However, her eyes were already filled with interest. Compared to the Desireless cultivation technique, Palace Master Wujua was naturally more important to Desireless. One must know that it was extremely difficult to obtain such a perfect Desireless. She did not wish to lose Desireless just like that. "The two of you, let's go to the 6 Desires Palace to discuss this matter in detail." Palace Master Wujua put away the spring snow and made an inviting gesture. The corners of old Lord Tusada's mouth curled into a smile. He chuckled and also put away the yin-yang pill fish. Together with Yamazi, he followed behind Palace Master Wujua. Whoosh! 5 days later, a ray of light rapidly streaked across the starry sky. In the end, it stopped in the Pill Furnace starfield. Although Zhuowen had spent quite a bit of time following Palace Master Jingyan to the 6 Desires starfield, he only spent 5 days to return. However, Zhuowen knew that the main reason for this was because he had operated the space-time wheel with all his strength. The space-time wheel was many times faster than Palace Master Jingyan's flight divine tool. After Zhuowen returned to the Pill Pagoda, he immediately notified the second elder. On the 10th floor of the Pill Pagoda, the second elder's gaze was solemn as he looked at Desireless before him. Zhuowen stood to the side, while the pill flame was still lazily lying within the brazier in the center. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, It was at the edge of the brazier. "Second elder, your knowledge of medicinal pills is much better than mine. Can you take a look at this medicinal powder and see if there's any problem?" Zhuowen took out a jade box and handed it to the second elder. Although Zhuowen didn't trust old monarch Tusida too much, Zhuowen still smeared a portion of the medicinal powder on Desireless' body before leaving. He knew very well that if he waited until he reached the pill pagoda, his position would be exposed. Thus, he could only try everything he could. Moreover, the second elder's alchemy skills were extremely outstanding. Even if there was a problem with the medicinal powder, Zhuowen would be able to find out immediately. At that time, he would be able to solve the problem. After examining the medicinal powder, the second elder's gaze immediately turned serious. He said in a deep voice, "Zhuoxiaoyu, this medicinal powder is indeed an extremely powerful medicinal powder capable of concealing the aura of the imprint. However, this medicinal powder itself has a strange fragrance. This fragrance is simply a superfluous component to this medicinal powder." "I'm afraid," hearing those words, Zhuowen's gaze instantly sank. Although the second elder didn't say it clearly, he knew that old monarch Tusida had deliberately placed this fragrance on Desireless' body. He didn't even need to think to guess the purpose of this. "That damned old bastard, he's really a wily old fox." Zhuowen cursed in his heart. However, he felt extremely helpless. Whether it was old monarch Tusida or Palace Master Wujua, these two terrifying experts of the life and death boundary, they had both left an imprint on Desireless' body. This caused Zhuowen to feel somewhat vexed. Moreover, he had already sprinkled a portion of the medicinal powder on Desireless' body. He was afraid that old monarch Tusida would quickly follow the fragrance to find him. "Zhuoxiaoyu, this fragrance is extremely obscure, but it's extremely long-lasting. If I'm not wrong, the person who deliberately created this fragrance can cross the entire heaven domain to follow this fragrance to find you." The second elder hesitated for a moment before finally speaking his worries. From the fragrance of this medicinal powder, he knew that the person who could refine this medicinal powder was definitely not an ordinary cultivator. He was an extremely terrifying expert. The second elder didn't know when Zhuowen had provoked such an expert. Therefore, he had no choice but to warn him. Zhuowen's complexion became even more unsightly. In his heart, he continuously cursed old monarch Tusida for being extremely cunning. However, he also knew that he had to leave the pill pagoda as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would definitely implicate the people of the pill pagoda. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, "Second elder, I've indeed offended an expert. Moreover, it's an expert of the life and death boundary. I'm afraid that this time it's a matter of life and death. Therefore, I'll take my clone with me. Also, can I borrow the pill fire and the pill emperor turtle?" After saying this, Zhuowen was still somewhat hesitant. His clone was his, but the pill fire belonged to the pill pagoda. He wasn't sure if the second elder would lend it to him or not. "What? You've offended an expert of the life and death boundary? Could it be Palace Master Wujua of the Six Desires Palace?" The second elder cried out in alarm. Zhuowen bitterly smiled but didn't reply. He knew that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly in a short time. Seeing that Zhuowen didn't reply, the second elder took it as Zhuowen's tacit agreement. He lightly sighed and said, "Do you think that the pill fire will remain in the pill pagoda after your clone leaves? I only hope that if you can escape this calamity, you can let your clone return to the pill pagoda." Zhuowen was startled. Soon after, he revealed a happy expression and cupped his fists towards the second elder, saying, "Many thanks, second elder. This Shua still has a request. I hope that the second elder can agree to it. Don't hesitate to ask. If this old man can help you, I'll definitely help you." The second elder said. Zhuowen pointed at Desireless and said, "Second elder, have you heard of the Six Desires Palace's Desireless cultivation technique and Desireless?" The second elder's gaze turned cold. Soon after, he looked at Desireless and said in astonishment, "You said that this person is Desireless?" That's right, his 5 senses have all been sealed. This is indeed the sign of Desireless. It's just that in the countless years of the Six Desires Palace, apart from the founder of the Six Desires Palace, there hasn't been a Desireless. But now one has actually appeared. After saying this, the second elder looked at Zhuowen. As if he had guessed something, he said, "Do you want to restore this desireless 6 desires?" Zhuowen nodded seriously and said, "Yes, this woman is a very important friend of mine. If second elder knows the method to restore the 6 desires, I hope that second elder won't be stingy with your guidance. This Zhuowen will be very grateful." The second elder's eyes flickered. He muttered to himself for a while and said, "The 6 Desires Palace's desireless cultivation technique is extremely famous. However, there are really too few desireless people. Originally, I was powerless. However, there are records of it in the ancient books of the Pill Pagoda. Wait a moment, I'll go and look for it." After saying this, the second elder entered the depths of the Pill Pagoda. Clearly, he was going to look for the ancient books. As for Zhuowen, a hopeful look appeared in his eyes. Chapter 2459. Alchemy Book. Not long after, the second elder returned with a dilapidated yellow book in his hand. He handed the book over to Zhuowen and said, "This is an alchemy book passed down from our Pill Tower. However, the content inside is extremely complicated. Even I can't understand it. However, there seems to be a method to restore the 6 desires. Take a look." Zhuowen thanked him and took the alchemy book. When his divine sense swept through the alchemy book, he was immediately dumbfounded. Zhuowen had never seen the words recorded in the alchemy book. Or rather, he couldn't recognize a single word. This wasn't the language of the 8 heavenly domains. The second elder saw Zhuowen's puzzled look and smiled bitterly. "Zhuoshayu, you don't have to look at me like that. I'm not too sure about this either. This alchemy book is the oldest alchemy book in our Pill Tower. The words inside are also extremely strange. However, there are some words recorded on the back of this alchemy book. It's about the method to restore the 6 desires. It should be added later on." Zhuowen took a closer look. Just as the second elder said, he did see some familiar words on the back of the book. These words should be the pill formula of some kind of pill. There were a total of 6 kinds of divine herbs recorded in the book. However, he only knew 3 of them. There were 2 that he had never heard of before. These 6 divine herbs were the Prime Purity Calamity Heart, Celestial Dipper Crystal, Origin Golden Essence Flower, Void Bone Refining Ginseng, 8 trigrams Dipper Yang Water, and Grand Essence Twin, Dragon Ganoderma. Among them, the Prime Purity Calamity Heart, the Heavenly Dipper God Restoring Crystal, and the Origin Golden Essence Flower were all extremely precious level 9 divine herbs. Furthermore, Zhuowen had obtained quite a bountiful harvest in the Divine Pellet Secret Realm, so he had 3 level 9 divine herbs with him. However, Zhuowen had never heard of the Void Bone Refining Ginseng, 8 trigrams Dipper Yang Water, and Grand Essence Twin Dragon Ganoderma. Could these 3 be level 9 divine herbs? Second Patriarch had also noticed the confusion in Zhuowen's eyes. He gave a bitter smile and said, "These 6 divine herbs are all the best among all level 9 divine herbs. Among them, the Shangqing Calamity Heart, the Heavenly Dipper Divine Crystal, and the Origin Golden Essence Flower can be found in the Divine Pill Secret Realm. But the other 3 divine herbs can't be found even in the Divine Pill Secret Realm." Zhuowen nodded and said, "I have these 3 divine medicines on me. Second elder, do you know where I can get the other 3? The second elder said in a deep voice, "As far as I know, the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, the 8 trigrams Divining Yang Water, and the Great Simplicity Double Dragon Ganoderma mainly grow in the heavenly domain of China. I remember that there is an extremely famous, dangerous place in the heavenly domain of China called the Boundless Taishu. These 3 divine medicines should grow in that dangerous place." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He'd never imagined that he would actually have to make a trip back to the heaven domain in the end. Speaking of which, he'd sacrificed himself to help Sky Saint comprehend a trace of the 9th level Tao insight, and then he'd left the heaven domain and never returned. He knew very well that the master-disciple relationship between him and Sky Saint had long been settled at that moment. At the thought of Sky Saint, Zhuowen thought of Su Qi again. Before Su Qi died, he'd given him a purple jade, and he'd felt the power of Tao insight in that purple jade. Moreover, Su Qi's ancestor had also comprehended Tao insight, and he'd even comprehended the 8th level Tao insight. However, he'd mysteriously disappeared. Zhuowen had planned to make a trip to the Su family, but he'd been in a hurry to break through, so he'd gone to the 6 Desires star domain first. Now that the heavenly domain of China was mentioned, Zhuowen thought of the Su family again. Back then, the ancestor of the Su family couldn't have disappeared for no reason. It was very likely that there was still some kind of teleportation array or space-time tunnel in the Su family, and that teleportation array or space-time tunnel was very likely to lead to the heavenly domain of China, where Sky Saint was. As for what happened to the ancestor of the Su family, Zhuowen didn't know, but he knew that it definitely wouldn't be good. However, Zhuowen felt a little helpless now. He knew very well that it would be a little difficult for him to leave the 6 Desires heavenly domain now. Now that he'd taken Desireless away, Palace Master Wujue had definitely sealed off the borders of the 6 Desires heavenly domain. Once he appeared at the borders of the 6 Desires heavenly domain, Palace Master Wujue would immediately know. At that time, he'd be exposed even faster. Second Elder, can the fragrance of this medicinal powder be concealed? Zhuowen asked anxiously. Zhuowen knew that as long as the fragrance was concealed, even if it was only temporary, it would buy him a lot of time. The Second Elder looked at the brazier behind Zhuowen and said, "The alchemy fire can devour everything related to elixirs. As long as the alchemy fire devours the medicinal powder, not only the fragrance, but the entire medicinal powder will be completely destroyed by the alchemy fire." Upon hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He hurriedly asked the black-robed Zhuowen to command the alchemy fire to devour all the medicinal powder in the jade box. However, when the alchemy fire devoured the medicinal powder on Desireless' body, Zhuowen only allowed the alchemy fire to eliminate the fragrance of the medicinal powder. He didn't allow the alchemy fire to devour the medicinal powder. Desireless' body still had the imprint left behind by Palace Master Wujue. If this imprint wasn't covered by the medicinal powder, it would be very easy for Palace Master Wujue to discover it again. After doing all this, Zhuowen discovered that the jade box containing the medicinal powder was actually intact. His gaze turned cold as he ordered the black-robed Zhuowen to place the jade box on an ownerless flying divine tool. Then he let the flying divine tool fly into the depths of the starry sky. Old Lord Tusada always did things flawlessly. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't dare to leave any of this old man's things behind. Who knew if this old man had done something to the jade box? After doing all this, Zhuowen finally let out a sigh of relief. At least, the crisis in front of him had been temporarily resolved. However, he also knew that with the power of the 6 Desires heavenly domain, they would eventually find him. As long as he didn't leave the 6 Desires heavenly domain, there was a possibility that he would be found. Therefore, he had to first go to the Su family to take a look. If the Su family really had a way to leave the 6 Desires heavenly domain, even if it wasn't a good place, he would still give it a try. Second Elder, I have to leave the Pill Pagoda. Otherwise, it will be very easy for me to implicate the Pill Pagoda. Goodbye. Zhuowen cupped his fists towards the Second Elder. Then he withdrew his doppelganger and alchemy fire. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, it very consciously jumped onto Zhuowen's shoulder. The Second Elder looked at the departing Zhuowen and whispered, I hope that Zhuo Xiaoyu can avoid this calamity. When he finally reaches the realm of 3 extremes, I hope that he can keep his promise and return the alchemy fire to the Pill Pagoda. After leaving the Pill Pagoda, Zhuowen immediately activated the space-time wheel and left the Pill Furnace star field. Chapter 2460. Su Qi's younger sister when Zhuowen left the Pill Furnace star zone and headed to the Su family. Palace Master Wujue sent off Old Lord Tusada and Yamazi with a gloomy face in the Six Desires Palace's plaza. Old Lord Tusada and Yamazi stayed in the Six Desires Palace for 5 days and finally negotiated with Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue also used these 5 days to order the people of the Six Desires Palace to completely seal off the borders of the Six Desires Heavenly Domain. The defenses of the Six Desires Heavenly Domain's borders were extremely tight and strict. They were much stronger than the Great Brahma Heavenly Domain. Moreover, there were several ancient teleportation arrays at the border. Once Zhuowen appeared at the border, Palace Master Wujue could teleport over immediately and capture Zhuowen. After the transaction with Old Lord Tusada, Palace Master Wujue naturally knew that the culprit who took Desireless away was actually Longwen, who was brought over by Palace Master Jingyan. Jingyan, this is all because of your foolishness. After Old Lord Tusada and Yamazi left, Palace Master Wujue impolitely glared at Palace Master Jingyan, who had her head lowered. Seeing that the latter only lowered her head and didn't say anything, Palace Master Wujue didn't say anything either. All of you stay in the Six Desires Palace. I'll chase after that arrogant brat. If news comes from the borders, immediately teleport over and intercept that brat. Palace Master Wujue casually instructed before turning into a stream of light and leaving the Six Desires star zone. Several days later, Palace Master Wujue landed in a barren pile of meteorites. According to Old Lord Tusada's method, she followed the fragrance and found this place. After shuttling through the pile of meteorites for a while, Palace Master Wujue immediately discovered a flying-type divine tool not far ahead. At this moment, the flying-type divine tool was completely dim. Clearly, it had exhausted all its energy and was stranded in the pile of meteorites. Found it! The moment Palace Master Wujue saw the flying-type divine tool, her beautiful eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Palace Master Wujue arrived at the flying-type divine tool and blasted it away. Then, before she could even react, the flying-type divine tool actually self-destructed. Rumble. The terrifying explosive energy was the first to envelop Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue rushed out of the explosion. Although she was not injured, her clothes were damaged by the explosion. She looked tattered and battered. Bastard! Palace Master Wujue roared furiously. She knew that she had been tricked. Her first reaction was that Old Lord Tusada had tricked her. However, she quickly realized that something was amiss. This flying divine artifact was of an extremely low level. There was no way an expert like Old Lord Tusada would be able to carry such a low-level flying divine artifact. A mere 8 steps void sky and dares to toy with this Palace Master? If this Palace Master finds you, I'll definitely make you beg for death. Palace Master Wujue quickly thought of the dragon rune. She knew that this cunning fella must have noticed that something was wrong, so he replaced the mark left by Old Lord Tusada. Now, Palace Master Wujue felt somewhat helpless. She could not sense the mark on Desireless' body at all. Clearly, it was still isolated. Trying to find dragon rune now was undoubtedly like trying to find a needle in a haystack. However, Palace Master Wujue was not worried. With the enormous power of the Six Desires Palace, it was actually not difficult to find dragon rune. As long as the borders of the Six Desires Heavenly Domain were sealed, Zhuowen would be found in the Six Desires Heavenly Domain. Thinking of this, Palace Master Wujue decided to return to the Six Desires Palace first. She was prepared to issue a wanted order and use all the forces in the Six Desires Heavenly Domain to find dragon rune. In the extremely remote starry sky in the northern part of the Six Desires Heavenly Domain, there was not even a star field here. There were only planets with thin energy. When Zhuowen saw such a remote place in the northern part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, he could not help but reveal a strange expression. He did not expect that there would be such a remote and backward place in the Six Desires heavenly domain. He knew very well that it was impossible for a void sky expert to exist in such a planet. According to the map that Su Qi had given him, the Su family was on one of these planets. This planet was called the Heavenly Spirit Planet. A stream of light swept out from a dim planet in front of him. Zhuowen immediately intercepted this stream of light. The person intercepted by Zhuowen was a rather innocent-looking woman. To Zhuowen's surprise, this woman's cultivation was only at the demigod realm. Of course, the reason this innocent-looking woman could cross the starry sky was because of the heavenly divine weapon under her feet. Otherwise, she would not have been able to leave the planet at all. At that moment, the innocent-looking woman was intercepted by Zhuowen. Her pretty face immediately revealed a shocked expression. She asked anxiously, "What are you doing? Why are you intercepting me?" When Zhuowen saw this innocent-looking woman, he could not help but be stunned. This woman in front of him was actually very similar to Su Qi, who had died back then. If he did not look carefully, Zhuowen would have thought that this woman was Su Qi. "Miss, what's the relationship between you and Su Qi?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. When the innocent-looking woman heard Su Qi's name, the anxiety on her pretty face could not help but disappear. She quickly said anxiously, "You've seen my sister. Do you know where she is?" Zhuowen thought to himself, as expected, this woman is really related to Su Qi and their sisters. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that although Su Qi's cultivation was not high back then, she was at least a void sky cultivator. However, why was Su Qi's sister only a pitiful heaven god? Moreover, judging from the place where the Su family was located, there are probably not many true god cultivators, let alone void sky experts. With Su Qi's cultivation, she could completely change the declining Su family. What Zhuowen did not know was that when Su Qi eloped with Jiao Wendong, she had broken off relations with the Su family. At that time, Su Qi was only at the heavenly god realm. However, later on, Su Qi had trained outside for many years and obtained many opportunities. That was why her cultivation had finally advanced to the virtual sky world. Originally, after Su Qi left the river of space-time quicksand, she had planned to return to the Su family. However, she did not expect that she would be betrayed by her lover, Jiao Wendong, in the river of space-time quicksand and eventually die there. Just as Zhuowen was about to say that Su Qi had died, his eyes narrowed. He saw two more streams of light rushing over from the front, and their target was him. "Someone is chasing you," Zhuowen asked. "Ah, yes, the Du family is still chasing me. No, let's leave this place first. You can tell me about my sister later." The innocent-looking woman immediately grabbed Zhuowen's hand and was about to leave with Zhuowen when the two streams of light in front of them blocked their path. "Second miss of the Su family, do you think it's possible for you to leave just like that?" A teasing voice was heard. Zhuowen shook his head. This innocent-looking woman was really a little careless. Since she was running for her life, she could actually forget about this matter. If he had not reminded her, this innocent-looking woman would probably have only realized it after these two people caught up to her. The two people in front of her were middle-aged men. One of them had dark eyes and a sharp nose. He looked sinister, while the other was bald and strong like an iron tower. The one who spoke just now was the man with the sharp nose. The innocent-looking woman's pretty face turned pale. She immediately pulled Zhuowen behind her and whispered to Zhuowen, "This has nothing to do with you. You'd better leave quickly. Don't worry about me." Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of surprise. He had a good impression of the innocent-looking woman in his heart. Chapter 2461. Heavenly Spirit Star Friend. We are the retainers of the Ling family. Please leave quickly and don't meddle in other people's business. The hook-nosed man's gaze was sinister. He stared at Zhuowen, but he was somewhat wary, although Zhuowen's aura was not obvious, and it seemed that his cultivation was not high. He was not a newborn calf. He could tell at a glance that the space-time wheel under Zhuowen's feet was extraordinary. To be able to use such an extraordinary flying divine tool, this person was definitely not simple. That was why the hook-nosed man did not immediately attack. Instead, he mentioned the Ling family behind him, and his tone was not that fierce. When the pure woman saw that the hook-nosed man was planning to let Zhuowen go, she could not help but let out a sigh of relief. She hurriedly said to Zhuowen, "This has nothing to do with you. You should leave quickly. Don't interfere in this matter." Zhuowen once again looked at this girl with a strange gaze. This pure girl's nerves were not ordinary. Even the hook-nosed man was able to discover his abnormality. But this girl's gaze revealed that Zhuowen's luck was not bad. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the pure woman. Instead, he said indifferently to the two people in front of him, "This woman is the sister of a friend of mine. For my sake, the two of you should let her go." As soon as these words were said, the hook-nosed man and the bald man's eyes darkened. "You really don't want face. Since that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite." The hook-nosed man snorted coldly and gave the bald man a look. Then, the two of them turned into two streaks of light and attacked from two directions. On the other hand, the pure woman said somewhat anxiously, "I run quickly. Both of them are heavenly god stage experts. You can't deal with them alone. Don't worry, although the Ling family is powerful, they don't dare to kill me. At least my life is not in danger." Zhuowen stood quietly on the spot. He didn't even move. He even smiled at the pure woman and said, "Your sister's name is Suchi. I haven't asked for your name yet." Seeing that Zhuowen was indifferent, the pure woman immediately became anxious. Just as she was about to say something, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Because according to the hook-nosed man and the bald man's speed, they should have already killed their way to Zhuowen. But now, not only was there no movement, there was not even the slightest movement. This was too strange. Then, the pure girl looked left and right. She realized that the hook-nosed man and the bald man had disappeared. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. Where is he? Why are those two fellows gone? The pure girl scratched her head in confusion. Maybe it was scared away by me? Zhuowen smiled faintly. Actually, when he was talking to the pure girl just now, he casually blasted out two streams of god power and blasted the two of them into nothingness. With Zhuowen's current cultivation, dealing with two celestial gods was simply bullying the weak. Originally, Zhuowen wanted to let the two of them go. Unfortunately, the two of them really didn't understand the situation and still planned to attack him. Naturally, Zhuowen wouldn't be so kind as to stand still and let the two of them kill him. The pure girl frowned slightly, but she felt that something was strange. The hook-nosed man and the bald man had clearly planned to kill the white-clothed youth in front of them. Why did they run away in the blink of an eye? And there was no trace of them at all. Although she was very puzzled by the disappearance of the hook-nosed man and the bald man, the pure girl didn't care much. She had a careless personality to begin with. Since she couldn't figure something out, she would never think too much about it. "I still don't know your name, Big Brother. And are you really my sister's friend? Where is my sister?" In the face of the pure girl's barrage of questions, Zhuowen smiled and said, "I'm Zhuowen. I met my sister, Suchi, by chance in the river of space-time quicksand." Zhuowen didn't intend to tell her about Suchi's death. He knew that if he said it now, the pure girl in front of him might change her expression. His goal this time was the Su family. It wasn't easy to meet someone from the Su family, so he naturally wanted her to lead him to the Su family. If she hated him because of Suchi's death, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. "I'm Su. Since you're my sister's friend, then you're my friend. By the way, you haven't told me where my sister is yet." Su said anxiously. Sue's cultivation wasn't high, and she lived in such a remote place. She had never heard of the famous river of space-time quicksand, so she wasn't surprised when she heard that Zhuowen had met Su Qi in the river of space-time quicksand. Zhuowen said apologetically, "Miss Su Qi and I parted ways after leaving the river of space-time quicksand. As for where she is now, I'm not too sure. Perhaps she'll come back in the future." Hearing this, Sue's eyes showed disappointment, but she was clearly an optimist. She said with a smile, "Although my sister had a conflict with our family many years ago, I know that she has always been concerned about the Su family. I believe that she will definitely change her mind and come back in the future." Looking at Sue's hopeful face, Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that Su Qi would never come back, but he wouldn't say this, at least not for now. "Big brother Zhuowen, will you come back to the Su family with me?" Su looked at him and asked. Zhuowen's expression brightened. Naturally, he quickly agreed. His goal this time was the Su family. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Su was naturally very happy. The two of them chatted happily on their way back to Heavenly Spirit Planet. Zhuowen also realized that Su was indeed very simple. Clearly, she was a girl who had never experienced great storms. During the conversation, Zhuowen also roughly understood the distribution of forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. In this remote area in the north, there weren't even any galaxies, let alone star fields. The only things that existed were these scattered planets. Of course, the laws of these planets were much better than the Heavenly Armor Planet, so they could nurture heavenly, God-level experts. Some powerful planets could even nurture true God-level experts. There were only 2 true God-level experts on Heavenly Spirit Planet. One of them was the patriarch of the Ling family, and the other was the patriarch of the Su family. The Ling family and the Su family were considered the 2 most powerful forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be conflicts. Moreover, there can't be 2 tigers on one mountain. The Ling family and the Su family had always been at odds with each other, and there was always friction on Heavenly Spirit Planet. However, it was usually only a small-scale conflict. This time, however, the Ling family had gone crazy. They actually openly challenged the Su family and threatened to kick the Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Planet. The Su family naturally refused, so the 2 families immediately clashed and started a large-scale battle. There were countless casualties. Chapter 2462. Blood Fiend Aresu Su was the second miss of the Su clan. Now that the Su clan was in imminent danger, Su was ambushed by the Ling clan during a battle. All the people she brought were annihilated, and even she was almost captured. If it wasn't for the Su clan's old ancestor giving her a flying divine tool, Su would have become a prisoner of the Ling clan. Of course, Su could have returned to the Su family. Unfortunately, 2 divine realm experts from the Ling family chased after her. In the end, Su had no choice but to leave Heavenly Spirit Planet. Su also knew that once she left Heavenly Spirit Planet, it would be difficult to return. Therefore, she planned to find her sister, Su Qi. Su Qi was the most talented genius of the Su family. The Su family's patriarch knew that after so many years, Su Qi's cultivation would at least be at the true God realm. She might even break through the true God realm and reach the virtual sky realm. As long as he could find Su Qi, the Su family's revenge would naturally be avenged. Speaking of the Su family, Su frowned. She sighed and said, "The patriarch's strength is actually more powerful than the patriarch of the Ling family. Unfortunately, the patriarch of the Ling family got that consumable divine weapon from somewhere and actually injured our patriarch. Now the Ling family is waiting for our patriarch to fall. Then they will launch an all-out attack and completely occupy our Su family." Speaking of this, Su felt helpless. At the same time, she looked at Zhuowen apologetically and said, "Big brother Zhui, you're a guest. It's only right to invite you to the Su family. However, The Su family situation is not optimistic. If Big Brother Zhua feels that it's inappropriate, you don't have to go back with me. Zhuowen smiled and said, "What's inappropriate? Moreover, I'm quite knowledgeable about pills. Perhaps if you bring me back, I can help your patriarch take a look." Su was a simple person. Seeing that Zhuowen knew about medicine, she actually believed him immediately. However, Zhuowen secretly shook his head. Su, this little girl, was not scheming. If he had any evil intentions, this girl would definitely die. After a while, the two of them went deep into Heavenly Spirit Planet. As soon as Zhuowen entered Heavenly Spirit Planet, he shook his head. The spirit energy on this planet was really lacking. Although it was much better than on Heavenly Armor Planet, Zhuowen was no longer the young boy who had just left Heavenly Armor Planet. After so many years of cultivation, he had been to the Tai Ching Immortal Realm, the Brahma Heaven Palace, and the Six Desires Palace. Which one of them wasn't a top-notch place in the Heaven Domain? He had even been to many dangerous and even treasured places. Even the planets in the Ziwei Galaxy that Zhuowen had taken into Devour's body were much more intelligent than this heavenly spirit star. It could be seen how scarce the earth and heaven energy in this star was. However, it was precisely because of the scarcity and remoteness of this place that Zhuowen chose to come here. Otherwise, the chances of being discovered by the Six Desires Palace would be too high if he went to those bustling galaxies and star regions. Moreover, most of the areas on Heavenly Spirit Planet were ruins, left behind by battles. Clearly, this planet was not peaceful. When Zhuowen's gaze fell on the broken walls left behind by the war, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, arousing Su's suspicion. "Brother Zhua, what's wrong with you? Is there something strange?" Su asked doubtfully. Zhuowen shook his head and said with a smile, "No, let's continue moving forward." Hearing this, Su didn't doubt him and continued to lead the way. However, what she didn't see was that after she turned around, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly became gloomy. Just now, Zhuowen's divine sense casually swept across those battlefields and immediately found some clues. Later, he used his divine sense to investigate further and found that there was a man-made array under each battlefield. Zhuowen had never arranged this array before, but he had heard of it before. It was called the Blood Evil Array. The Blood Evil Array was a kind of array that absorbed the blood chi of the human body and gathered it in the array to transform it into a huge amount of cultivation energy. The advantage of this array was that it could make the cultivation speed of the cultivator extremely fast. After all, the blood chi was the energy of the human body, so the cultivator didn't need to convert at all and could directly absorb it. However, the reason why the Blood Evil Array was so insidious was that this Blood Evil Array would not only absorb the blood chi of cultivators, but also powerless mortals. It was very common for cultivators to kill each other, but to kill innocent mortals was a practice that went against the laws of nature. Even if this kind of cultivator cultivated very quickly, the end result was basically very miserable. According to Zhuowen's knowledge, most of the people who used the Blood Evil Array were evil cultivators. They were disgusting people who hoped to use improper methods to quickly improve their cultivation. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart was filled with murderous intent. If it was possible, he would go back and find that evil cultivator and kill him now. However, when his divine sense went deep into battlefields, he only found the Blood Evil Array and didn't find the evil cultivator. Since he was determined to kill that evil cultivator, Zhuowen naturally didn't want to act rashly and alert the enemy. Otherwise, that evil cultivator would definitely escape. Moreover, Zhuowen faintly felt that this battle on Heavenly Spirit Star was very likely related to that evil cultivator. "Miss Su, was this battle started by the Ling family?" Zhuowen asked casually. Su was leading the way in front. When she heard Zhuowen's question, she nodded and said, "Yes, I don't know what's wrong with that Ling family. They said that they want to chase our Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Star and even instigated all the cultivators on Heavenly Spirit Star. Even many innocent mortals were involved." The battle between cultivators has nothing to do with mortals. But that Ling family... Speaking of this, Su Su's beautiful eyes revealed a look of resentment. It was obvious that she deeply hated the Ling family. Zhuowen nodded. He was now basically certain that the Ling family should be related to that evil cultivator. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so coincidental. Soon, the two of them arrived at Suzhou City, where the Su family was located. Suzhou City's defense was quite strong. There were powerful restrictions all around, emitting bursts of flowing light. However, the formations and restrictions in Suzhou were only a threat to cultivators below the Void Sky stage. They were not worth mentioning for Void Sky cultivators. This was because the restrictions on Suzhou City were at most a level 1 array. Even a virtual sky realm cultivator might not necessarily be able to defend against it. Big Brother Zhua, this level 1 array, was purchased by our Su family's ancestor from the Gulen Galaxy. I heard that the Gulen Galaxy is one of the most powerful galaxies in the entire Six Desires heavenly realm. Speaking of Suzhou City's level 1 array, Su Su's beautiful face revealed a trace of pride. She couldn't help but raise her head and puff out her chest as she introduced it to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was a little speechless. However, this level 1 array was indeed enough on Heavenly Spirit Star. True God cultivators couldn't break this array at all. After Su Su took out her identity token, she brought Zhuowen into Suzhou City smoothly. Suzhou City was quite calm at this moment. The cultivators passing by all looked hurried and worried. Sigh, it's all because of the war. Chapter 2463. Su family's old ancestor. Young Lady Su Su, you're all right. I was so worried. Suddenly, an excited voice came from nearby. Then, a middle-aged man walked over with a group of soldiers and stopped in front of Su Su. His face was filled with excitement. Uncle Xiao, I thought I would never see you again. Su Su was pleasantly surprised. She couldn't help but hold the middle-aged man's hands. There was even a trace of mist in her eyes. Zhuowen silently looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and frowned. The man's words just now were too abrupt. His tone was as if he already knew something would happen to Su Su. Previously, Su Su could be said to have told him everything. She even told him about being chased. It was said that she was ambushed by the enemy. In the end, she relied on the flying divine tool given to her by the Su family's old ancestor to escape. Su Su seemed to have only told him about this. As for this middle-aged man, he shouldn't have known. However, when the middle-aged man saw that Su Su was back, his first sentence was a little strange. This made Zhuowen suspicious. Of course, Su Su didn't notice the problem in the middle-aged man's words. At this moment, she was reminiscing with the middle-aged man. Young master, thank you for saving young Lady Su Su. I am Su Xiao, the Su family's head steward. You are young Lady Su Su's savior. The Su family owes you a debt of gratitude. Please accept my bow. The middle-aged man came in front of Zhuowen. His face was filled with gratitude, and he was about to bow to Zhuowen. Zhuowen stood in the same place and didn't move. He didn't stop the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's originally bowed body stiffened. His eyes revealed a bone-chilling coldness. However, since Zhuowen didn't show any courtesy, he could only take the opportunity to bow deeply to Zhuowen. So, it's the steward of the Su family. You're too polite. Actually, I didn't help much. The two people who were chasing after us suddenly left for some reason. So, I can only say that Miss Su Su and I are lucky. Zhuowen smiled. The middle-aged man stood up. His expression was not very good, but he still smiled and said, No matter what, young Master Zhua, you saved our young lady's life. Now, please follow this old man back to the Su family. Also, young lady, I have already informed the patriarch that you have returned. He said that he wants to see you. The patriarch is awake. That's great. Big Brother Zhua, come with us. Su Su exclaimed in surprise. However, the middle-aged man stopped the two of them. Shortly after, the middle-aged man looked at Su apologetically and said, "Miss, after all, this person isn't from our Su family. Moreover, the ancestor only summoned you. Let him follow." The middle-aged man didn't finish his words, but a troubled expression appeared on his face. Su, on the other hand, said carelessly, "Uncle Xiao, don't worry. Big brother, Zhuo isn't an outsider. He's friends with my sister. Hasn't the ancestor always wanted to know my sister's whereabouts? Now that big brother Zhuo has brought it over, he will definitely be happy." The middle-aged man's gaze froze. Shortly after, he sized up Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen could sense the coldness in the middle-aged man's gaze. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. "So you're the young lady's friend." "Young master, it's not that this old man doesn't believe you, but the young lady has left the Su family for a long time. How can you prove that you're the young lady's friend?" The middle-aged man's tone was cold. Su's beautiful eyes froze. She said with some displeasure, "Uncle Xiao, big brother Zhuo is my savior. It's not good for you to doubt him like this." "Miss, now is the time when the Su family and the Ling family are at war. Some people have unknown origins. They might be from the Ling family. So it's best for you to be vigilant," the middle-aged man continued. Su's expression turned ugly. She coldly snorted and said, "Uncle Xiao, thank you for your reminder. I'll go see the patriarch now." After saying that, Su brought Zhuowen and walked past the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't stop them. Instead, he turned to look at Zhuowen's back. His eyes revealed a contemplative look. "Big brother Zhuo, I'm sorry. Uncle Xiao is a cautious person, so he might have said something inappropriate just now. I hope you don't take it to heart." Su apologized to Zhuowen. "It's fine. My origins are indeed unknown. Your Uncle Xiao is right. But why does Miss Su believe me so much?" Zhuowen looked at Su in surprise. "Because I feel that you're not a bad person. So you're definitely not a bad person," Su said with a smile. Hearing such an answer, Zhuowen was speechless. After entering the Su family's mansion, because of Su, the two of them were naturally unimpeded. They went straight to the Su family's patriarch's pavilion. The Su family's patriarch's pavilion was heavily guarded. There were even other restrictions outside the pavilion. It could be said that it was airtight. Of course, to Zhuowen, these restrictions were no different than nothing. "Second miss, this person can't go in." The guard stopped Zhuowen and looked at Su as he said, "He's my savior and my sister's friend. The patriarch definitely wants to see him. If you don't inform him, how do you know the patriarch won't let him in?" Su said with a glare. When the guard seemed to be saying something, an old voice came from the pavilion, "Let them in." The guard cupped his hands towards the pavilion and no longer stopped Zhuowen. Then, the two of them entered the depths of the pavilion. The pavilion's decoration was extremely simple. Other than a wooden bed, there was a wooden table and a few stools. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the pavilion. On the wooden bed, an old man with a head full of silver hair sat cross-legged. His face was pale and his breathing was chaotic. After Su and Zhuowen entered, the old man opened his eyes. He looked at Su kindly and said, "Su, you scare me to death. When you activated the flying divine artifact, I thought you were in some kind of life and death crisis." Su came to the bedside and naturally hugged one of the old man's arms. She said, coquettishly, "Patriarch, it's all thanks to my luck. Of course, there's also Brother Zhuo's help." As she spoke, Su began to talk about what happened when they were running for their lives. The old man listened very carefully. "Friend, thank you for saving Su." The old man looked at Zhuowen with a kind smile, but soon he looked straight at Zhuowen with a serious expression. Then he said to Su, go out for a moment. I have something to say to this little friend." Su pouted and said, "What is it that you need to hide from me?" The old man stroked Su's hair and said with a smile, "Su, be good. I really have something important to say to this little friend. Don't be willful, okay? Although Su was very unwilling. She didn't want to disobey the patriarch's order. She could only reluctantly nod and leave the pavilion. In the empty pavilion, only the old man and Zhuowen were left. Purple jade is in your hands. What did you do to Chi-er? The old man's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Zhuowen. Chapter 2464. The Su family's forbidden area. You're talking about this purple jade, right? Zhuowen took out the purple jade from his spirit ring and tossed it to the old man on the bed. The old man took the purple jade and examined it. His eyes were filled with excitement as he raised his head to look at the young man in white in front of him in confusion. Obviously, he could not understand why the young man in white would give the purple jade to him so easily. However, his heart calmed down a lot. He knew that the young man in white in front of him had no ill intentions. The purple jade was given to me by Miss Su Chi before she died. Before Zhuowen could finish speaking, the old man's entire body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow as he trembled and said, "What did you say? Chi-er, she died?" Zhuowen came to the old man's side, took out a divine pill and fed it to the old man. The old man's face, which was originally pale, suddenly became much rosier. The old man was shocked by the effects of this divine pill. He could clearly feel that the injuries in his body had healed by more than half in an instant. Moreover, the effects of the divine pill were extremely powerful and had not been completely absorbed by him. If he absorbed all of these medicinal effects, his injuries would probably be completely healed. Although the old man was shocked by the divine pill that Zhuowen had given him, he did not think too much about it. His main concern now was Su Chi's death. "Young friend, why did Su Chi die? How did she die?" The old man grabbed Zhuowen's arms excitedly. If he had been wary of Zhuowen at the beginning, he was no longer wary of him. He knew that if the young man in front of him wanted to harm him, he would not have taken out such a precious divine pill to heal his injuries. Zhuowen sighed softly and told the old man the details of Su Chi's death. At the same time, he took out the image of the crystal ball that he had recorded in the quicksand river in time and space and gave it to the old man. After the old man finished watching the image in the crystal ball, his right hand trembled and his eyes were filled with guilt and anger. This Jiao Wendong is really a beast. Back then, Su Chi left the Su family for him. I thought that Jiao Wendong would treat Chi-er well, but I didn't expect him to be a wolf in human skin, the old man said, trembling. "Don't worry, old sir. I have already killed Jiao Wendong. I have also avenged Miss Su Chi. These are Miss Su Chi's ashes. Her last wish was for her ashes to return to her roots." Zhuowen sighed softly. He took out an urn of ashes and handed it to the old man. The old man trembled as he received the urn. He struggled to get up and kneeled on the ground with a plop. He said gratefully to Zhuowen, "Senior, thank you for everything you've done for Chi-er. As long as Senior has any orders, I, Sui, will do it for Senior even if I have to sacrifice myself." Based on the image in the crystal ball, Sui naturally knew that Su Chi was already a void sky cultivator and that Jiao Wendong's cultivation level was even higher than Su Chi's. Previously, Zhuowen had said that he had already killed Jiao Wendong. It was obvious that this ordinary-looking, white-clothed young man was definitely a void sky cultivator who was stronger than Jiao Wendong. Zhuowen helped Suyi up and said with a smile, "Old sir, don't call me senior. My name is Zhuowen. You can call me Brother Zhuo." When Suyi heard Zhuowen say this, he could only nod and change his way of addressing him. However, his expression and attitude were still respectful and cautious. Although Zhuowen looked very kind, Suyi knew that this young man before him was extremely powerful. He was a legendary void sky cultivator, so he did not dare to treat him carelessly. After all, there are only two true gods on Heavenly Spirit Planet, and it was even more impossible for them to have a void sky cultivator. So Yi naturally had to be cautious when facing a void sky cultivator. Zhuowen did not pay attention to Su Ye's careful thoughts. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, "Old Sir Su, Miss Su Qi once told me that your Su family's ancestor obtained this purple jade and comprehended the power of Tao intent." Su Ye's pupils constricted, and he sighed softly. "Brother Zhua, our ancestor indeed comprehended the power of Tao intent because he obtained this purple jade. However, he also mysteriously disappeared because of the power of Tao intent. Not only my ancestor, but the following generations of brilliant successors of the Su family also mysteriously disappeared because they comprehended the power of Tao intent in the purple jade. It is precisely because of the disappearance of these Su family prodigies that our Su family has fallen into such dire straits." Zhuowen nodded. He had already heard about the disappearance of the Su family's powerhouses from Su Qi. However, he still wanted to ask how these powerhouses disappeared. "Your Su family's ancestor shouldn't have disappeared for no reason. Do you know where he went missing?" Zhuowen asked with interest. Su Ye's expression froze, and he immediately said with some hesitation, "Brother Zhua, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but this place is the Su family's forbidden area. It's also a cursed place. If you go in, I'm afraid you'll be implicated." So, before Su Yi could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Zhuowen. "Old Sir Su, the reason I came to the Su family this time is because of this purple jade." Zhuowen stopped beating around the bush with Su Yi and immediately revealed his purpose this time. He did not have much time now. Although the heavenly spirit planet was remote enough, he was still a little afraid that the Six Desires Palace's forces would extend here. If he still could not leave the Six Desires heavenly domain by then, he would most likely die. Although Zhuowen had never entered the Su family's forbidden area, he had a premonition that there was definitely something like a teleportation array in this forbidden area. Although the other end of the teleportation array might be a land of evil, this was Zhuowen's only way out. Of course, he would only use this method when he had no other choice. He would only use it when he was at his wit's end. Now he mainly wanted to find out the ins and outs of the Su family's Tao intent. Perhaps he might be able to gain something. Su Yi felt the unyielding tone in Zhuowen's tone, and his eyes flickered. Although he was a little hesitant, he still sighed in the end and said, "Brother Zhua, if you insist on taking a look, I'll take you there. However, if anything happens, I won't be responsible." "Old Sir Su, don't worry. Even if something happens, I won't implicate your Su family," Zhuowen promised. Su Yi sighed softly. What he was most afraid of was that if Zhuowen suffered a great loss in the forbidden area and vented his anger on the Su family, then their Su family would really be finished. Knock, knock, knock. Someone suddenly knocked on the door urgently. Su Yi frowned and said, "What's the matter?" A rather panicked voice came from outside. "Patriarch, the Ling family's patriarch has brought the Ling family's cultivator army to Suzhou City." Su Ye's expression changed slightly, and then he looked at Zhuowen with some hesitation. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Old Sir Su, give me the address of the forbidden area. If you have something to do, you can go ahead first." Chapter 2465. Ling Tianzong Su Yi knew very well that if Zhuowen wanted to help the Su family, the Ling family could be destroyed with a flip of his hand. However, judging from Zhuowen's tone, it was clear that he did not want to interfere in the conflict between the two families. Naturally, Su Yi did not dare to rashly bring it up. Moreover, Su Yi also discovered that ever since he took the divine elixir Zhuowen gave him, not only had his injuries completely healed, but his divine power also seemed to be much stronger than before. Although he did not know what kind of divine elixir it was, he knew that it must be extremely valuable. At the very least, it was impossible for him to obtain such a divine elixir at his current level. Su Yi took out a jade slip and handed it to Zhuowen, saying, Brother Zhua, the location of the forbidden area is not on Heavenly Spirit Planet. This place is extremely hidden, and no one in the Su family knows about it except for me." Zhuowen took the jade slip and cupped his fist, saying, "Thank you, Elder Su!" Su Yi hurriedly waved his hand and cupped his hands, saying, Brother Joie, I'll take my leave first. I wish you all the best. After saying that, Su Yi hurriedly left the room. After Su Yi left, Su entered the room and said to Zhuowen seriously, Brother Zhuowen, do you want to come with me to the city wall of Suzhou City? Those bastards from the Ling family are attacking. Zhuowen shook his head and smiled, saying, No, you can go and take a look yourself. I still have some things to take care of. Su pouted. Although she was a little unhappy with Zhuowen's rejection, she did not pester Zhuowen to go. Instead, she gave a few instructions to Zhuowen and left the room. Soon, all the guards in the loft where Su Yi was were all gone. Obviously, they had all been taken away by Su Yi. Zhuowen stood in the courtyard and took out the jade slip. After scanning it with his divine sense, his eyes revealed a look of surprise. This was because the location of the forbidden area recorded in the jade slip was even more remote than Heavenly Spirit Planet. It was located in the depths of a dead star in the northernmost part of the Six Desires Heavenly Domain. Thinking of this, Zhuowen disappeared and left Heavenly Spirit Star. Given Zhuowen's present cultivation, it was as if the restrictions of Suzhou did not exist in his eyes. However, before Zhuowen left, he left his doppelganger in Suzhou. He suspected that the sorcerer who had set up the Blood Evil Matrix had some connection to the Ling family. If that sorcerer had made a move, Suzhou would definitely have been lost. Thus, he had left his doppelganger behind just in case. On the vast land in front of Suzhou, a dense army of cultivators floated in the air and quickly approached Suzhou. At the very front of this army of cultivators, there was an extremely luxurious flying ship leading the way. When the cultivator army saw the ship, they were all in awe. They knew that the person living in the ship was their ancestor, Ling Tianzong. 10 li away from Suzhou, the cultivator army stopped. A blue-robed old man slowly walked out of the cabin of the luxurious spaceship in front of the army. The blue-robed old man's gaze was as sharp as a sword. He looked indifferently at the restrictive formation in front of Suzhou and sneered, Old bastard Su, are you dead yet? If not, then don't be a coward. Come out and fight me. It's not good for the great ancestor of the Su family to be a coward. When Ling Tianzong said this, the cultivator army behind him roared with laughter. All sorts of obscenities were spewed out, degrading Su Yi. Many of the Su family members on the city walls were furious. Some of the younger ones couldn't hold it in and wanted to charge out and attack. However, these young and impulsive Su family members were all stopped by Su Yi. Su Yi stood on the city wall and looked at Ling Tianzong emotionlessly. Ling Tianzong, do you dare to fight me one-on-one? Ling Tianzong looked at Su Yi and frowned. He clearly remembered that Su Yi had been heavily injured by the divine weapon he had obtained from the sorcerer. At that time, Su Ye's injuries were extremely severe. If he didn't have any divine pills or miraculous medicine, she would be waiting for death. According to Ling Tianzong's prediction, Su Yi shouldn't be able to hold on much longer. But now, Su Yi appeared in front of him without any injuries. Ling Tianzong would be lying if he said he wasn't shocked. Su Yi also saw the shock in Ling Tianzong's eyes. She was even more grateful to Zhuowen. Now, not only was her injuries completely healed, but her cultivation had also improved under the effects of the medicine. Ling Tianzong's cultivation was originally weaker than Su Ye's. Last time, he relied on a powerful consumable divine weapon to heavily injure her. This time, Su Yi was confident that even if Ling Tianzong still had that divine weapon, even if he wasn't a match for her, he wouldn't be heavily injured again. Once Ling Tianzong used up that consumable divine weapon, it would be time for her to counterattack. Humph! Why wouldn't I dare? Su Yi, you old bastard, come out and fight me. Ling Tianzong snorted and jumped out of the flying ship. He hovered in front of Suzhou City, causing the cultivators of the Ling family to cheer. Su Yi took a step forward. He clenched his hand and took out an extremely thick and long black spear. His entire body shot forward and charged towards Ling Tianzong. Ling Tianzong also immediately took out his natal divine weapon. His divine weapon was a blue broadsword. The blade was 5 feet long and looked extremely exaggerated. Bang! 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 In just an instant, Su Yi and Ling Tianzong were engaged in a fierce battle. Terrifying energy flew everywhere. In Suzhou City, Su Su looked at the two people fighting nervously. Master Su Ye's injuries have healed? Su Xiu walked to Su Su's side and asked in surprise. Su Su said proudly, Uncle Xiu, you misjudged. Ever since the ancestor came into contact with Brother Zhuo, her injuries have healed. You didn't believe Brother Zhuo before, but now you should believe him, right? Su Xiu's eyes became serious. He said in a deep voice that Zhuan's medical skills are so brilliant. I have to admit it. Oh right, why don't I see Zhuan? Su Su said casually. Brother Zhuo said he had something to take care of. He shouldn't be here. He should still be in the Su family mansion. Then Su Su suddenly looked in front of her in surprise and said, Ling Tianzong, that old guy lost. How useless. The ancestor is indeed the best. Su Xiu looked up and saw Ling Tianzong flying backwards while vomiting blood. Su Yi only grunted and took a few steps back. Moreover, the moment Su Yi stopped, her right foot stepped on the air and rushed forward again, catching up with Ling Tianzong, who was flying backwards. Ling Tianzong's face was ugly. He realized that Su Ye's strength was even stronger than before. Bang! Ling Tianzong barely blocked Su Ye's pursuit. Then he was blasted down from the sky by a powerful force and landed heavily on the soft soil. Su Yi floated in the air and looked down at Ling Tianzong, who was in a sorry state. She said coldly, other than relying on external objects, You are completely useless. Today I will kill you. Ling Tianzong's face was gloomy. He sneered, You don't dare to kill me. If you dare to kill me, your granddaughter, Su Su, will die. Su Yi sneered, You're about to die. What nonsense are you spouting? Do you think I will believe your nonsense? Chapter 2466. Extinguished Star Su Yi subconsciously turned his head. Immediately after, a strong wind blew over and heavily smashed into his chest. Su Yi spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated several hundred meters. Only then did he realize that the person who had ambushed him was actually someone he was familiar with. It's you, Su Xiu? Su Yi looked at Su Xiu in disbelief. At this moment, Su Xiu was holding Su Su with his right hand and had an evil smile on his face. My lord! Ling Tianzong had already climbed up and hurriedly cupped his hands toward Su Xiu. His eyes were filled with respect. Su Yi looked at Ling Tianzong's performance and couldn't help but frown. He really couldn't understand why Su Xiu would do this. Moreover, the aura that Su Xiu was emitting gave him a strong sense of threat. He had never felt this kind of threat before. It was a kind of despair threat. Su Yi knew that this kind of feeling could only be felt when facing a terrifyingly powerful cultivator. Obviously, Su Xiu was very powerful. Su Yi, you don't have to think too much. The real Su Xiu is already dead. Su Xiu's mouth was filled with a mocking smile. He didn't mind telling the truth at all. Who are you? Su Ye's eyes were dark. He didn't expect that the Su Xiu he had always trusted was actually not the real Su Xiu. Moreover, the real Su Xiu was already dead. Who I am is not important. What I want to ask you now is, what did Zhuo give you to eat? It actually allowed you to recover from your injuries in such a short period of time. Even your strength has become much stronger than before. Su Xiu said indifferently. Su Yi clenched his fists. He felt extremely sullen, but there was nothing he could do. His intuition told him that Su Xiu was very terrifying. You're not going to tell me? Then you don't care about Su Su's life? Su Xiu grabbed Su Su's hair and revealed Su Su's tear-stained face. It's an elixir. I've never seen it before. There are 3 golden lines on the surface of the elixir. It looks like the claws of a golden crow. Su Yi said in a deep voice, "Three-legged golden crow elixir." Su Xiao was pleasantly surprised. He knew that this was a level 3 divine pill, and its value was comparable to an ordinary level 4 divine pill. He never thought that the ordinary Zhuowen would have such a precious divine pill on him. Jie, that Zhuowen is really rich. He casually took out a level 3 divine pill to heal you. However, I'm going to take his life. I'll also take all the treasures on his body. Su Xiao chuckled and formed a seal with his hands. Immediately, a streak of bloody light shot out from his seal and landed on the surface of Suzhou's seal. Su Yi, on the other hand, was shocked. He naturally knew about level 3 divine pills. These divine pills were luxurious medicinal pills that only void sky cultivators possessed. He didn't expect that Zhuowen would actually give him such a precious divine pill to heal his injuries. However, when he recalled that Zhuowen was also a void sky cultivator, he felt a lot more at ease. However, based on Su Xiao's aura, he was probably also a void sky cultivator. Su Yi wasn't sure if Zhuowen would be a match for Su Xiao. However, Su Yi soon realized that something was wrong. He suddenly looked toward Suzhou City and discovered that the surface of Suzhou's seal had turned into a blood-red barrier. Inside the blood-red barrier, the Su family disciples and mortals in Suzhou City were surrounded by a large amount of death qi. Their essence qi was absorbed by the blood-red barrier, turning them into dried corpses. You set up a formation in Suzhou City a long time ago. Su Yi was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was furious as he watched the Su family disciples die one by one. Boom! However, not long after the blood-red barrier appeared, countless cracks appeared on its surface, as if it had been shattered by a terrifying force. The smile at the corners of Su Xiao's mouth immediately froze. Shortly after, he abruptly looked towards Suzhou City. He discovered a youth in fluttering black clothes floating above Suzhou City. Countless fragments of the spirit boundary fell around him like rain. Su Xiao frowned slightly when he saw the face of the young man in black. He wasn't unfamiliar with the young man's face. It was exactly the same as Zhuowen's. The black-clothed Zhuowen slowly walked through the air and landed in front of Su Xiao. "Big brother, here." Su raised her head with difficulty and looked at the black-clothed Zhuowen in front of her as she muttered in a low voice. "Let her go," the black-clothed Zhuowen said coldly. However, Su Xiao sneered. "Who do you think you are? Do you think I let you go just because you told me to?" The black-clothed Zhuowen didn't refute. He said indifferently, "Void Sky, 5th stage. Your cultivation isn't bad. Unfortunately, your body has hidden dangers. You set up the Blood Fiend formation under the battlefield to treat your body's hidden dangers, right?" Su Xiao's pupils shrank. He didn't expect the black-clothed young man in front of him to see through his cultivation with a single glance. He even saw through the extremely hidden Blood Fiend formation. Su Xiao's gaze became fearful. He discovered that no matter how he probed, he couldn't detect any aura from this person. Su Xiao's forehead began to sweat. He discovered that his judgment was completely wrong. He originally guessed that the young man in front of him had a cultivation similar to his and was just hiding it. However, he now discovered that the young man in front of him was very likely stronger than him. Moreover, the young man was much stronger than him. However, how could there be a void sky cultivator stronger than him in such a remote place like Heavenly Spirit Star? Weren't powerful void sky cultivators all in those bustling star fields? How could they come to such a remote and desolate place? Soon, Su Xiao discovered that he couldn't move his body. Then, a palm gradually enlarged in his eyes. Finally, his consciousness sank into darkness. Su Yi and Ling Tianzong watched in shock as the black-clothed Zhuowen annihilated Su Xiao with one move. Their bodies trembled and their eyes were filled with reverence. The two of you continue. I've taken care of this evil cultivator. He won't affect your battle anymore. After saying this, the black-clothed Zhuowen returned to Suzhou City with Su Su. Ling Tianzong smiled bitterly. He cupped his fists at Su Yi and said, "Brother Su, let's stop the battle here. Our Ling family will compensate for everything your Su family has lost by 3 times." After witnessing Zhuowen's strength, Ling Tianzong didn't dare to provoke the Su family anymore. Although Zhuowen didn't interfere, Ling Tianzong didn't dare to continue the battle. If he forced the Su family into a corner, their Ling family might be completely annihilated by this terrifying expert. Su Yi nodded. He also didn't have the desire to continue the battle. After witnessing Zhuowen's strength, he felt like a frog at the bottom of a well. He was also somewhat disinterested in this kind of battle. In the northernmost part of the 6 Desires heavenly domain, Zhuowen quietly looked at the dense meteorite belt in front of him. In the center of this dense meteorite belt, there was a huge black sphere. Upon closer inspection, the surface of this sphere was covered with fiery red cracks. It was as if the center of this sphere was filled with endless flames and magma. Inside this extinguished star is the Su family's forbidden area recorded in the Jade Slip. Chapter 2467. Shui Yunzi. The moment Zhuowen drilled into the black sphere, a terrifyingly hot temperature assaulted his senses. He felt as if his entire body was on fire. His whole body turned red and he felt extremely uncomfortable. The surface of the black sphere was cooled magma. Inside the black sphere was a terrifying mixture of flames and magma that looked like gold. The temperature inside had already reached a terrifying level. Even Zhuowen's body turned red from the heat. He had no choice but to take out the everlasting ice lotus to resist the heat. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, Zhuowen went deep into the core of the star. The core of the star was completely exhausted and looked a little dim and dark. Even so, the core of the star was still the core of the star. It was also the place with the most terrifying temperature. Zhuowen observed the core for a long time. Other than the core in the center, he did not discover anything else. Could it be that Su Ye's map is fake? Zhuowen muttered to himself. However, he quickly discarded this thought. Su Yi knew that he was a powerful void sky cultivator, so taking out a fake map wouldn't do her any good. It might even bring about a calamity. In Zhuowen's opinion, Su Yi had no reason to give him a fake map to fool him. Let's search again. Zhuowen did not believe it. His powerful spiritual consciousness began to radiate. His spirit soul was much stronger than before. The number of spirit constellations in his spirit soul had reached 8,000. Once Zhuowen's spirit constellation broke through 100 million, Zhuowen believed that his spirit soul would be on par with the void sky 9 steps extreme boundary of life and death. However, the cultivation of the spirit soul was more difficult than cultivation. Without great opportunities, the cultivation speed would be extremely slow. Zhuowen had experienced it before, so he knew very well how difficult it was to cultivate the spirit soul. Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness radiated in all directions, not letting go of a single trace of his surroundings. All of a sudden, Zhuowen gasped. He moved as fast as the wind, dashing to the deepest core of the star. The temperature of the star core was indeed terrifying. Fortunately, Zhuowen's everlasting ice lotus was not ordinary. That terrifying temperature did not cause too much damage to Zhuowen. Arriving in front of the star nucleus, Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness repeatedly scanned the surface of the star nucleus. Finally, he found a very small crack on the left side of the star nucleus. This crack was extremely inconspicuous. If Zhuowen hadn't inspected it so carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. Zhuowen's spirit was shaken, and he came to the front of the crack. His spiritual consciousness entered the crack. The moment his consciousness drilled into the deepest part of the crack, a purple intent suddenly wrapped around Zhuowen's consciousness. It was like a giant purple hand that wanted to crush Zhuowen's consciousness. The appearance of the purple intent was too sudden, and Zhuowen was immediately hit. However, he made a prompt decision and immediately cut off his consciousness. Then he opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was already pale and bloodless. Is that the power of Tao intent? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of horror. He was too familiar with the purple intent that wrapped around his consciousness. It was the power of Tao intent. It seems that the Su family's forbidden area should be inside the star nucleus. Zhuowen was not surprised, but happy. He swallowed a healing pill and adjusted his body to the best state. Then he began to dig along the crack. The hardness of the star nucleus was beyond Zhuowen's imagination. Even if he used the king's sword to continuously dig, he could only dig a hole the size of a fist after an hour. The star nucleus is the hardest thing in a star. Your king's sword can't dig it at all. If it wasn't for the death chi in the king's sword, it would be wishful thinking to dig a hole the size of a fist. At this moment, the pale emperor turtle appeared on Zhuowen's shoulder and shook its head. You have a way. Zhuowen knew that the pale emperor turtle must have a way. Otherwise, this guy would not have come out. Burn it with fire. Only when the star nucleus is wrapped in fire will it gradually soften. Moreover, it must be a strong flame. Don't you have the alchemy fire? Let the alchemy fire help you. The pale emperor turtle said. Zhuowen nodded. The alchemy fire was still with the black-clothed Zhuowen. Now, he could only ask the black-clothed Zhuowen to come here. Fortunately, through his divine sense, Zhuowen also learned that the black-clothed Zhuowen had completely eliminated the evil cultivator hiding on the heavenly spirit star. So, it was obviously a good time for the black-clothed Zhuowen to leave. After waiting for a few hours, the black-clothed Zhuowen also entered the vicinity of the star nucleus. According to the instructions of the original Zhuowen, it used the alchemy fire to completely wrap the star nucleus. After a while, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to find that the originally indestructible star nucleus began to soften like melting snow. Zhuowen continued to wait. He planned to dig the star nucleus out after it had completely softened. In an extremely luxurious mansion of the drifting sand family in the Gulen galaxy, a pale-faced man in blood-red clothes slowly opened his eyes. There was a trace of viciousness and hatred in his eyes. How dare you kill one of my blood corpses and destroy the blood evil formation that the blood corpses spent a lot of effort to set up? I'm going to kill you with my own hands. The red-clothed man roared furiously, but soon the man in blood-red clothes calmed down. His eyes flickered as he said, This guy's aura seems to be around the void, heaven 8 steps, but he gives me a sense of threat. This guy is definitely not an ordinary void heaven 8 steps expert. I have to discuss this with Kuang Li. Thinking of this, Shui Yunzi left the mansion and walked to the place where Kuang Li was in seclusion. Master Shui Yunzi, Master Kuang Li, is still in seclusion. If there is nothing important, he said not to disturb him. 2 guards respectfully stopped Shui Yunzi. Shui Yunzi frowned slightly and said coldly, What's wrong with Kuang Li? I remember that he just came out of seclusion not long ago, right? Why is he in seclusion again? Master Kuang Li was injured by a despicable man named Zhuowen. He has been in seclusion ever since, so... One of the guards said, cautiously. Shui Yunzi nodded, but the moment he heard the name Zhuowen, his eyes widened and he hurriedly said, What did you say just now? Zhuowen was the one who killed Kuang Li? Do you have a video of Zhuowen? The guard looked troubled. Kuang Li being injured by a junior like Zhuowen wasn't something to be proud of. If he were to show Kuang Li the video and let Kuang Li know, he would definitely be punished. However, Shui Yunzi was not an ordinary person. He was the guest elder of the Quicksand family and a half-step void heaven 9 steps expert. Even Kuang Li did not dare to be rude to him. He also could not afford to offend such an existence. What? Are you looking down on me? Is that why you don't want to show me the video? Shui Yunzi's eyes suddenly turned cold. Chapter 2468. Stone Gate Shui. Yunzi nodded. He took the crystal ball and looked at it for a while. Then he squinted his eyes and thought to himself, it really is Zhuowen. But this Zhuowen is so strong and has comprehended space-time divine sense. No wonder Kuang Li was seriously injured by him. The more Shui Yunzi watched, the more frightened he became. In the image, Kuang Li could not resist at all under the effect of the space-time divine sense. Shui Yunzi did not think that his strength was much stronger than Kuang Li's. He believed that if he was under the effect of such a terrifying space-time divine sense, he would also be seriously injured or even killed. Shui Yunzi was afraid. Fortunately, he came to discuss with Kuang Li in advance. Otherwise, he would be in trouble if he rashly looked for Zhuowen. Master Shui Yunzi, do you know about the arrest warrant issued by Six Desires Palace? Suddenly, the guard asked cautiously. Shui Yunzi was stunned. He really did not know about the arrest warrant issued by Six Desires Palace. Most of the time he stayed in his mansion and used the connection with the blood corpses to set up the blood evil array on the remote planets so that he could refine blood qi for cultivation. Shui Yunzi did not only have blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star, but also on other remote planets. With so many blood corpses, the amount of blood qi they provided him every day was absolutely terrifying. Now, Shui Yunzi's strength had even surpassed Kuang Li's and was not far from the life enlightenment realm. As long as Shui Yunzi could comprehend a trace of the law of heaven, he would immediately be promoted to the life enlightenment realm. In fact, Shui Yunzi did not care that the blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star were destroyed. The main reason why he noticed the blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star was that there was an 8 steps void heaven expert, like Zhuowen there. Moreover, Zhuowen was not an ordinary 8 steps void heaven expert, which was why Shui Yunzi noticed Zhuowen. It was precisely because he had noticed Zhuowen that he was able to learn of this string of events related to Zhuowen. The guard didn't wait for Shui Yunzi to speak and continued. I happened to see the arrest warrant, and the target is also Zhuowen. It's just that his name has been changed to dragon characters, but his face is exactly the same. Even the Six Desires Palace is looking for him. What did he do that made the Six Desires Palace go to war with him? Shui Yunzi was shocked. After all, the Six Desires Palace was the ruler of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Every move of such a force naturally had a great impact on the other cultivators in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Is there any reward for this arrest warrant? Blood Cloud Master suddenly asked. Others might not know what Zhuowen was up to, but he was very clear about it. Before he reported Zhuowen, he wanted to see what kind of price Six Desires Palace would offer. The reward for finding out Long Wen's whereabouts and reporting it to the Six Desires Palace is said to be 10,000 supreme grade divine stones and a free chance to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. If someone can catch Zhuowen, not only will he be rewarded, but he will also be eligible to join the Six Desires Palace as a senior member and enjoy all the resources of the Six Desires Palace for free. The guard's eyes were full of yearning as he said this. The Six Desires Palace was like a sacred place in the eyes of all the cultivators in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Everyone wanted to enter the Six Desires Palace. However, the conditions for the Six Desires Palace to recruit disciples were too harsh. Moreover, it was even more impossible to become a high-ranking member of the Six Desires Palace step by step. Therefore, the Six Desires Palace must have put in a lot of effort to offer such conditions. The moment Shui Yunzi heard this condition, his eyes immediately became blazing. Senior Shui Yunzi, if you really have something urgent, I'll go in and ask Master Kuang Li. Before the guard finished his words, he was interrupted by Shui Yunzi. No need, it's fine now. The guard looked at Shui Yunzi, who turned around and left. Obviously, he didn't expect Shui Yunzi to change his attitude faster than flipping a book. Inside the Desire Palace, Palace Master Wujue sat in his seat with a gloomy look, but he was a little anxious in his heart. Desireless was related to whether he could reach the Tao realm in the future or not. She couldn't let anything happen to Desireless. She had to find him as soon as possible. However, it had been some time since the arrest warrant was issued, but there was no news of him. This made Palace Master Wu Jue extremely angry. He's just an 8 steps void sky brat. How could there be no news of him after so many days? Even the borders of the 6 desires, heavenly domain, had been sealed off. Where could he be hiding? Palace Master Wu Jue's heart was filled with hatred, but he felt extremely helpless. The 6 Desires Palace had sent many people to countless star domains and issued arrest warrants, but there was still no news of Zhuowen. This made Palace Master Wu Jue even more anxious and resentful of Zhuowen. If he could find that brat, he would definitely let that brat have a taste of his own medicine. Suddenly, a disciple of the Desire Palace rushed in, causing Palace Master Wu Jue to frown. "Palace Master, there's news of Longwen," the disciple said in surprise. Palace Master Wu Jue quickly got up and said, "Is that true? Does this person know the location of Longwen?" This person knows, but he didn't say the specific location of Longwen. He said that he needs us to go to his place, and then he will take us there. That person is called Shui Yunzi, and he is located in the Guilin Galaxy, the disciple said. Palace Master Wu Jue nodded and said, "Let's go. Follow me to the Guilin Galaxy." The temperature of the alchemic fire was very high. After several hours, the star core finally softened, and Zhuowen's digging became much easier. Not long after, Zhuowen dug out a rather deep tunnel. Zhuowen slipped into the tunnel like a wisp of smoke. When he reached the end of the passage, Zhuowen stopped. In front of him was a huge stone door that was 3 feet tall. The surface of the stone door was covered with dense purple patterns, and a purple intent lingered on the surface of the stone door. Zhuowen knew that his divine sense was annihilated by the power of the purple intent on the surface of the stone door. What a powerful Tao intent! What is hidden behind this stone door? When he felt the terrifying purple intent on the surface of the stone door, Zhuowen couldn't help but widen his eyes. His Tao intent had already been comprehended to the 7th level, but he could feel that the power of the Tao intent on the stone door was even stronger than the 7th level Tao intent he had comprehended. This feeling was comparable to the moment when Zhuowen comprehended a trace of the 9th level Tao intent. After hesitating for a moment, Zhuowen stretched out his hand and placed it on the surface of the stone door. Instantly, countless purple intent flowed from Zhuowen's hand and spread throughout his body. Chapter 2469. Violet Prison. The Tao that can be spoken is an extraordinary Tao. The name that can be spoken is an extraordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. So it's often nothing to desire to observe its profundity. It's often there to desire to observe its profundity. These two come from the same source, yet have different names, and are both called profundities. Profundities within profundities, the door of profundities. The ethereal voice slowly reverberated by Zhuowen's ears. If you want to enter the door of profundities, then you must first escape your own shackles and prisons before you have the qualifications to possess it. Suddenly, a firm and low voice broke the ethereal voice, and then Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was a violet-colored world, and the surroundings of this violet-colored world were covered in dense violet-colored iron bars, causing this violet-colored world to seem like a violet-colored prison. Right above the violet-colored world floated a violet-colored revolving sphere, and the surface of this sphere was completely formed from violet-colored gas, causing it to look extremely strange. At the same time, Zhuowen noticed numerous figures that sat cross-legged within this violet-colored prison, and there were a few hundred of them with a rough glance. But these figures were all distributed in every corner of the prison, and they sat cross-legged without saying a word and not caring about each other. Moreover, Zhuowen noticed that all these figures actually contained the energy of Tao insight, and the lowest amongst them was first-level Tao insight, whereas he'd even seen a person that had comprehended eighth-level Tao insight. The Tao that can be spoken is an extraordinary Tao. The name that can be spoken is an extraordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. So it's often nothing to desire to observe its profundity. It's often there to desire to observe its profundity. These two come from the same source, yet have different names, and they're both called profundities. Profundities within profundities, the door of profundities. The ethereal voice resounded out once more, and then Zhuowen noticed that the few hundred figures that sat cross-legged had opened their eyes successively. These eyes didn't contain the slightest emotion, and they were instead filled with a strange violet color. When Zhuowen saw these gazes, he knew that all of them had fallen into an illusion of Tao insight. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The hundreds of figures that were originally motionless all flew up into the sky. Then, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, they actually began to kill each other. One figure after another fell from the sky. Zhuowen discovered that the figures that were killed did not really die. Instead, after they fell to the ground, the purple sphere in the sky shot out a purple light, and the dead figures began to revive. However, the will of the way of these resurrected figures had all been stripped away. Zhuowen looked up at the sky, and his eyes revealed a look of understanding. The Tao intent of those cultivators who became more and more courageous as they fought increased by a lot with every kill. Boom! Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air blasted towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen coldly snorted and subconsciously wanted to take out the king's sword from his spirit ring, but found that his spirit ring could not be opened in this space. It was also this brief moment of surprise that revealed his fatal flaw. The figure that rushed over fiercely punched Zhuowen in the chest. Zhuowen groaned, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, his physical body was extremely strong. Although this punch was terrifying, it was not fatal. Boom! 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 The figure that attacked Zhuowen did not show any mercy. The moment Zhuowen retreated, he took a step forward and followed up with another attack. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He radiated his powerful divine sense and found that his divine sense was actually completely suppressed. However, his divine sense was so strong that even though it was suppressed, it could still radiate a distance of several meters. With the help of his divine sense, Zhuowen easily dodged the attack. Then he suddenly clenched his fist, and the power of Tao insight gathered on his fist. He slammed his fist on the figure's head, smashing it directly. Thump! After the figure fell, Zhuowen found that a purple intent swept out from the figure's head and finally entered his body. The power of his Tao insight seemed to have increased a little. However, at the same time, Zhuowen also found that his consciousness began to be a little affected by this inexplicably increased power of Tao insight. Zhuowen's face was gloomy. He knew that this inexplicably increased Tao insight was definitely not a good thing. Although it could increase the power of Tao insight, it could also turn one into a beast without the ability to think. In fact, he even discovered that there was an additional black paste in his soul. This black paste emitted black gas, and it was actually polluting the galaxies in his divine soul space. Fortunately, Zhuowen's divine soul was so strong that it had 8,000 galaxies, which was equivalent to a small starry sky. This black paste was so small that the range of pollution was extremely limited. But Zhuowen didn't dare be careless, because he knew very well that along with the increase in the number of people he killed, this black paste would accumulate more and more in his divine soul, and there would come a day when it would pollute his entire divine soul. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen became even more cautious. At the same time, he didn't stand out forcefully. So long as those figures didn't offend him, then he would absolutely not make a move, and he would only silently observe. According to Zhuowen's inference, this violet-colored space was very likely related to the so-called door of profundity, but he was slightly bewildered. He only knew that the door of profundity was related to Tao insight, yet he still didn't know what exactly the door of profundity was. Zhuo sat cross-legged at a corner and utilized his divine sense to completely conceal the aura of his Tao insight. Zhuo believed that within this space, he was probably the only person that was still able to utilize his divine sense, coupled with the other people in this space that had already lost their reason. So long as they couldn't sense the energy of Tao insight in his body, then they would basically be unable to find him. As the battle continued, the number of people fighting in the sky became fewer and fewer. In the end, only a single figure remained. This was a black-clothed man around the age of 30. His skin was dark, and at this moment, the violet Tao insight on his body was extremely dense and dazzling, as if he was a terrifying violet sun. Zhuo's gaze became extremely solemn when he sensed the violet Tao insight on this black-clothed man. He was able to sense that the Tao insight on this person's body had even surpassed the 8th level Tao insight and had already touched upon a trace of the 9th level Tao insight. "I want to leave this place. Get the hell out here." The black-clothed man floated in midair and raised his head to look at the violet sphere in the sky, and his gaze was filled with desire and battle intent. As soon as the black-clothed man finished speaking, the violet sphere suddenly surged up, and then the violet sphere transformed into an enormous violet beast that possessed 4 heads. Zhuo's pupils couldn't help but constrict at the instant he saw this enormous beast, because he noticed that the 4 heads of this enormous beast were actually the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise. Weren't these 4 sacred beasts the sacred beasts of legend that had once appeared in the heavenly armor continent? Moreover, it wasn't just that. The legends of the 4 sacred beasts were widely spread in the earth of the heaven domain of Huaxia. Chapter 2470. The confinement farm. At the instant the enormous beast appeared, the black-clothed man's eyes burst out with monstrous battle intent. "Fight! I'll be able to obtain my freedom by defeating you." The black-clothed man suddenly flashed out. The violet Tao insight on his body was like a blazing sun that spread throughout the entire space. Bang! 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 The black-clothed man collided with the enormous beast, and then a terrifying ripple swept through the entire space. Within this violet world, there were actually countless pitch-black holes that were like black holes. When the aftershock gradually disappeared, a figure in a sorry state directly fell down and smashed onto the ground. Zhuo looked over. He knew that the black-clothed man had already been defeated. Moreover, the enormous beast had only used a single move to defeat the man. The price the man paid was his life. His entire body was torn apart, but he was quickly revived, and the energy of the Tao insight on his body had completely returned to 0. Zhuo sat cross-legged at a corner and looked up at the enormous beast that had fused with the 4 divine beasts. Only now did he clearly sense that after the man was killed, the energy of the Tao insight on the man's body was completely devoured by the enormous beast. After devouring the energy of the Tao insight, the enormous beast was perfectly satisfied, and it once again transformed into a violet sphere that was like a violet blazing sun that hung high in the sky. "Damn it! There'll be a day when I defeat you, and then I'll regain my freedom and leave this place." The black-clothed man hammered the ground with unwillingness, and then he stood up and walked to another corner before sitting cross-legged and starting to cultivate from scratch. Zhuo looked around and felt a trace of fear in his heart. He noticed that this space was truly too similar to the confinement farms in the mortal world. The enormous beast devoured the owner of the confinement farm, whereas the animals they were trapped here were the livestock that were being reared in the confinement farm. When the owner needed food to slaughter livestock, they would usually start from the largest and fattest livestock to slaughter. Moreover, wasn't the fattest livestock precisely this black-clothed man? Zhuo shook his head. So long as they were trapped in this confinement farm and ate the feed provided by the owner of the confinement farm, then these livestock would forever be restrained by the owner and would forever be unable to have the freedom to escape. After Zhuo killed one of them earlier, he'd already noticed that something was off. The energy of the Tao insight absorbed from here was fundamentally flawed, and there was even an extremely terrifying black paste within it. It was the black paste that caused Zhuowen to be extremely wary. Zhuowen dared guarantee that if he was killed by the enormous beast, then even though he could be revived, the 7th level Tao insight he'd comprehended with great difficulty would be completely devoured by the enormous beast. I have to get that black paste out first. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. The black paste that had entered his sea of consciousness was really a big problem for him. His intuition told him that if the black paste continued to exist in his sea of consciousness, it would be extremely unfavorable for him. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, the few hundred people that had been resurrected all possessed a small amount of Tao insight energy. After that, these people once again tirelessly started to kill each other and seize the Tao insight energy in the bodies of others. Due to the protection of Zhuowen's divine sense, the Tao insight energy in his body didn't leak out at all. This also caused the others to not notice Zhuowen. Zhuowen concentrated his energy and operated the 8,000 galaxies in his sea of consciousness. The terrifying divine sense was like a violent hurricane that constantly consumed the black paste that existed in Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. To Zhuowen's pleasant surprise, his powerful starry sky divine sense was really able to consume the black paste, but the consumption rate was extremely slow. After Zhuowen eliminated the black paste with great difficulty, he discovered that a new round of battle had once again come to an end, and the final victor was the black, clothed man again. The black, clothed man's willpower was extremely strong. Although he had been killed by the enormous beast countless times, he would start all over again every time. After obtaining the final victory, he still wasn't afraid of death and challenged the enormous beast again. The result this time was still the same as the last time. He was still instantly killed by the enormous beast with a single move. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. The black-clothed man had killed everyone, and the Tao insight energy in his body had already reached the level of a trace of 9th level Tao insight. However, he was still instantly killed by the enormous beast with a single move. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to have the strength to fight this enormous beast, he must possess the strength of 9th level Tao insight. Of course, Zhuowen also suspected that the enormous beast being able to kill the black-clothed man so easily was probably related to the black paste. When he thought of this, Zhuowen became even more fearful of the black paste. However, Zhuowen also secretly rejoiced in his heart. His soul was different from ordinary cultivators, so even though there were restrictions here, it wasn't completely restrained and couldn't be used. Moreover, his divine sense was similarly capable of expelling the black paste. Moreover, after expelling the black paste, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to discover that his divine sense had actually strengthened slightly. With this discovery, Zhuowen was extremely delighted in his heart. He slowly stood up and withdrew the divine sense that was set up around his body before instantly releasing the aura of his Tao insight. Instantly, the eyes of the two nearby cultivators were filled with a violet intent, and they roared like wild beasts as they flashed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a step forward and suddenly blasted out with his fists, instantly killing the two of them. 2 strands of Tao insight energy flowed through his hands and entered his body. At the same time, 2 more black paste appeared in his sea of consciousness. After killing the 2 of them, Zhuowen once again released his divine sense and concealed his Tao insight energy. After that, he sat cross-legged in a corner and started to use his divine sense to refine the black paste. Since this black paste could strengthen his divine sense, why wouldn't Zhuowen do it? Naturally, he planned to slowly temper his divine sense here. Zhuowen knew that as long as his divine soul galaxy could break through 100 million, then his divine sense would become extremely huge, enough to be comparable to the life and death extremes. At that time, if he relied on this divine sense to execute the soul kill, he was afraid that even the life and death extremes experts would be affected. Although it might not cause too much damage to the life and death extremes experts, it could at least restrain the life and death extremes cultivators. Thinking of this, Zhuowen worked even harder to refine the black paste. This was a good thing for him, so he wouldn't let it go just like that. Time passed by minute by minute. Zhuowen didn't know how long he had stayed in this purple space. He only knew that the endless battle repeated over and over again, and the final winner was always the black-clothed man. Every time the black-clothed man challenged the 4 giant beasts, it would end in failure. Finally, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. In the depths of his eyes, which seemed to carry a golden light, was a vast and boundless starry sky. Zhuowen's temperament had become even more unusual. If one looked carefully, they would find that Zhuowen looked very ordinary, but when one looked at him, one would feel an extraordinary feeling. Chapter 2471. The black-clothed man's counterattack at this moment. Even if Zhuowen didn't have to intentionally control his divine sense, the energy of the Tao insight on his body had automatically withdrawn into his body. Because in the process of ceaselessly refining the black paste and absorbing the Tao insight, his Tao insight had automatically advanced to the 8th level. This Tao insight was something that he had comprehended on his own. Even though he had borrowed the power of the Tao insight in this space, Zhuowen knew that this Tao insight was completely his own and not something that the master of this space had given him. Because the energy of the Tao insight within his body didn't have the hidden dangers of the black paste. Even if he faced the 4 enormous beasts, it was impossible for Zhuowen to be restrained and defeated in a single move like the black-clothed man. The Tao that can be Tao is not an ordinary Tao. The name that can be named is not an ordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. Therefore, there is nothing that desires to observe its profundities. There is something that desires to observe its mysteries. These two come from the same origin, yet have different names, and they are both called profundities within profundities. The ethereal voice resounded out once more, and the cultivators that sat cross-legged in the surroundings leaped up successively like walking corpses before fighting each other once more and absorbing the Tao insight from each other. Zhuowen walked amidst this slaughter like a lone traveler, and no one noticed his existence, nor did they feel the sound of his footsteps. Zhuowen raised his head to look at the numerous figures that were fighting, and his gaze contained a trace of pity. He knew that these people had completely become livestock in this violet-colored world, and they would have to provide nourishment for the Tao insight of the 4 enormous beasts for eternity. Moreover, Zhuowen wouldn't join in this meaningless slaughter like they had. He had to find the exit here, and once he found the exit, he would be able to leave this place. Zhuowen believed that since this place was created, then there was surely an exit. Of course, based on the black-clothed man's display, it seemed that he would be able to leave this minor world after defeating the 4 enormous beasts. But Zhuowen didn't believe in this possibility. Could livestock defeat the owner of the farm? Perhaps it was possible, but Zhuowen knew that this possibility was extremely small. Zhuowen would never use such a risky method if he wasn't completely confident. Moreover, after this period of observation, Zhuowen had figured out the identities of these few hundred people. These people were all the geniuses of the Su clan in the past generations, and they were all geniuses that had comprehended 8th-level Tao insights. If Zhuowen guessed correctly, the black-clothed man who won every time was probably the Su family's ancestor, the guy who obtained the purple jade and led the Su family to rise. However, it was a pity that the Su clan's successive generations of patriarchs had all become like this, becoming the producers of Tao intent for the 4 enormous beasts within the door of profundity. In other words, they were the so-called livestock that could be slaughtered by anyone. Now, Zhuowen suspected that the door of profundity was related to the Grand Pure One. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that he had been wrong. He had thought that there would be a teleportation array or a place to travel through time and space. He had not expected it to be a prison. However, Zhuowen had a premonition that so long as he left this place, then the true exit would absolutely not be the six desires' heavenly domain. When he arrived at the edge of the violet-colored prison, Zhuowen noticed that this edge was surrounded by violet-colored fences. As for outside the violet-colored fences, Zhuowen noticed that it was an expanse of violet mist, and he was utterly unable to clearly see what exactly was at the end of the violet mist. Even if Zhuowen's divine sense was extended out, he noticed that it was completely blurry. In other words, even his divine sense was utterly unable to detect anything within this violet mist. Zhuowen's brows knit together. He noticed that this world of violet mist was truly too strange, and he kept having the feeling that the other end of the violet mist was surely related to the exit. Moreover, if he wanted to leave, then he had to break through the iron fences here. But during this period of time, Zhuowen had ceaselessly investigated, and he noticed that this iron fence was utterly impossible to break through, unless it was the strength of a 9th-level Tao insight. Otherwise, breaking through the iron fence was utterly a delusion. Roar! A bestial roar exploded out of thin air, and the 4 giant beasts appeared once again. However, the black-clothed man was still awe-inspiring and fearless. He had once again obtained the final victory and faced the 4 giant beasts once again. Zhuowen turned around and raised his head to look at the tenacious, black-clothed man. His gaze revealed that he was moved. After observing for a period of time, Zhuowen noticed that the rest of the people had all fallen into the slaughter, and only the black-clothed man's consciousness was still hovering between being clear-headed and being lost. It was precisely because of this that the black-clothed man was able to obtain the final victory every time. Roar! The 4 giant beasts roared loudly, and their gigantic beast claws descended from the sky, crushing towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man let out a long howl towards the sky, and the violet intent on his entire body suddenly boiled and actually transformed into a violet mist that stretched as far as the eye could see. Then, within this violet mist, a pattering of violet rain poured down. The black-clothed man clenched his fists in the air, and a violet sword with a swirling violet light condensed in each of his hands. He has touched the threshold of the 9th-level Tao insight. Zhuowen's gaze revealed astonishment as he looked at the black-clothed man who was bathed in violet jade. The 4 giant beasts revealed even more furious expressions. They never imagined that this human, who was their food, would actually be able to comprehend a trace of the 9th-level Tao insight. He was clearly just food, yet he actually dared to attack his master, and this caused the 4 giant beasts to be extremely furious. The 4 giant beasts intended to properly teach this stubborn human a lesson. Bang! The 4 giant beasts' gigantic claws blasted towards the black-clothed man, and those enormous claws contained terrifying Tao insight. As expected, these 4 giant beasts have grasped the strength of the 9th-level Tao insight. Sensing the giant beast's claws, Zhuowen's gaze flickered slightly, and he lightly sighed in his heart. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that the might of the claws blasted out by these 4 giant beasts wasn't as strong as he imagined. It seemed to be stronger than the trace of the 9th-level Tao insight that he had comprehended in the past, but it wasn't that much stronger. This feeling was very strange. Zhuowen clearly saw that these 4 giant beasts had grasped the 9th-level Tao insight, but in his eyes he instead felt that the power of these giant beasts' 9th-level Tao insight wasn't very strong. In his senses he felt that the 9th-level Tao insight of these giant beasts seemed to be lacking something, but he couldn't figure out what it was exactly. This claw directly tore apart the violet mist, and it blasted towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man roared towards the sky, and the violet sword in his hand suddenly slashed out. On the other hand, he was like a ghost as he disappeared on the spot. Not only did he dodge the giant beast's claws, but the terrifying violet sword chi from his 2 swords directly blasted open a huge wound on the giant beast's claws. The 4 giant beasts were extremely furious, and they blasted out their claws one after another. However, after the black-clothed man had touched the threshold of the 9th-level Tao insight, his mind was much clearer than before. As he dodged the giant beast's attacks, he continuously blasted the giant beast's bodies with his sword.